The invitation was gold embossed. The entrance it pointed to was the service door. Laverne St. Clair is 31, a Black American woman from a Haitian family. For 8 years, she was the live-in housekeeper of the O Mansion, navy uniform, white apron, 2 wide pockets, hands that kept a dead man's house in order. Then the heiress decided to burn the old patriarch's things, including one worn uniform he'd begged Laverne to keep safe. Watch the man in the black tuxedo. Lee Jun-ho, 28. They call him the Phoenix, for the black bird inked down the left of his neck, rising from under his collar. A mafia boss with a luxury watch and a signet ring. The heiress hands Laverne a real gala invitation, in front of everyone, a joke dressed as kindness. But the invitation routes her to the service entrance, and while she's gone, men are cleared to search her room. Silver crystals against a navy apron. A borrowed necklace against a dead man's secret. 2 worlds that were never supposed to touch. On the red carpet, the heiress will scream that the gown is stolen. And then Jun-ho offers his arm. But what happens after that door closes behind her changes everything. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The phone buzzed against the marble sink, and Laverne knew who it was before she turned it over. 3 in the morning here, 9 at night in Newark. Josiah only called at that gap when something had gone wrong. She dried her hands on the white apron. The O Mansion slept around her, 40 rooms of it, and she had been scrubbing the last of the wine off the ballroom floor because Heires's guests had left it there, and Heiress had said no one was to sleep until it was gone. Aunt Vern, his voice cracked on the second word. 15, and still it cracked. The school called Mom. The trip deposit. It was due Friday. How much? 400. But if we don't send it by tomorrow, they give my spot to the waitlist kid. Laverne pressed her thumb between her eyes. $400. She had $1,100 in the account and rent was 6 of it and her sister's insulin was 2. You'll go, she said. You hear me? You'll go. You always say that. And you always go. He laughed, small and wet, and she held the phone tighter as if she could reach through it. 6 years she had been raising a boy through a phone. 6 years of birthdays she heard about, report cards she photographed off a screen, a voice cracking through a wire while other women's floors gleamed under her knees. She had left Newark to earn the thing that would bring him over one day. She had not counted on the earning taking her whole life. Tell your mom I said take her shot before dinner, not after, she said. She forgets when you're on the phone. She's fine, Vern. Tell her anyway. Then a door opened somewhere above her, and heels started down the grand staircase, unhurried, and Laverne stood up straight the way she had trained her body to stand. I have to work, baby. I'll send it tonight. She hung up before he could argue. Heiress came down the last 3 steps in a silk robe the color of blood, hair already pinned into its low bun even at this hour, because the heiress of the O family did not let anyone see her undone. She looked at the floor, then at Laverne, then at the bucket. There's a streak by the window. I'll get it. You said that an hour ago. Laverne looked at the window. There was no streak. There had not been a streak in an hour. But she carried the bucket over anyway, knelt, and ran the cloth across glass that already shone, because the streak was never the point. The point was to watch her kneel. My father kept low staff, Heiress said, walking a slow circle around her. He said it built character. I think it just built floors. She stopped. You've been here how long? 6 years. 6 years. Heiress tasted it. Long enough to forget where the door is. Laverne kept the cloth moving. Small circles. Her knees ached against the cold. Somewhere in her chest, a thing she had folded up very small, pressed against its folds, and she pressed it back. Heiress crouched, close, so the silk pooled on the wet floor, and Laverne would have to clean that too. You know what my father saw in you? He told me once. She tilted her head. He said you didn't flinch. He liked that. He collected things that didn't flinch. A pause. I find it insolent. He was kind to me. He was old and dying, and you were convenient. Heiress stood, wiping her palm on a tissue, as if the air near Laverne had dirtied it. Kindness is what the weak call being tolerated. I need to wire money to my nephew, she said. Level. May I use the office computer before the household wakes? I'll dock it from my hours. Heiress's mouth curved. Money troubles. A school trip. How poor is your family exactly? Laverne looked up then, just once. Long enough for the younger woman to see that the eyes looking back were not afraid, only tired, and that the tiredness went down further than Heiress had floors. Then she looked back at the glass. May I use the computer? Heiress waved a hand, bored already. Fine, but you'll finish here first. All of it. I don't want to see a bucket when I come down for breakfast. She turned and climbed the stairs, robe hissing behind her, and Laverne stayed on her knees until the door above closed. Then she sat back on her heels and breathed, one long breath, and finished the floor that had already been finished. The office was Dong-wook's once. Oh, Dong-wook, the old patriarch, dead now 11 months, and no one in the house said his name anymore. But Laverne said it, quietly, when she sat in his chair to send the money, because he was the only one in 6 years who had said hers back. She logged into the transfer service, typed the numbers she knew by heart, 400 to her sister's account, and then, because her hand hesitated, 400 more, everything she could spare, and $80 she couldn't. Send. The screen thought about it. Confirmed. She closed the browser and sat in the dark and let herself be, for 30 seconds, a woman who had just made a boy's whole year possible from 4,000 miles away. On the desk, under the lamp, sat a photograph the housekeeping staff had never been told to remove. Dong-wook, younger, standing in front of a low brick building with a sign she couldn't read, and beside him, a row of women in navy dresses, white collars, white aprons, 2 wide pockets, the same uniform she wore now. You never told me what it was, she said to the photo. But he had told her one thing. Near the end, when his hands shook too badly to hold a cup, and it was her he wanted holding it, he had gripped her wrist with a strength that surprised her and said, "Keep the old one, the first uniform, not the new ones, the one with the mended hem. Promise me you keep it." And she had promised, because you promise a dying man anything, and then she had kept it, folded in tissue at the bottom of her closet, because a promise was a promise even when you didn't understand it. She had asked him once, near the end, who the women in navy were. He had been having a clear hour, the medication balanced, his eyes bright in a body that had otherwise quit. "My best work," he'd said. "Better than the towers, better than any of it." Then his face had closed like a hand and he'd said no more, and the nurse had come, and Laverne had never asked again because asking cost him something she could see draining out of his face. She traced the row of women in the photograph with one finger. Whatever they had been, the house had erased them. She had never heard the cooperative named at a single dinner, never seen its papers filed with the family's real business, never met a soul who admitted it had existed, a whole workshop of women, gone the way steam goes. She was still looking at the photograph when the intercom crackled. Laverne, Heiress's voice, wide awake now, sharp. The east storeroom, now. The east storeroom held the dead man's things. 11 months, and no one had touched them. Boxes of files, a rack of dark suits in garment bags. Ledgers, dozens of them, spines cracked, in a language Laverne read only in pieces, and in the corner, a wardrobe trunk that had been Dong-wook's before it was anything, brass corners gone green. Heiress stood in the middle of it in her blood-colored robe, and beside her stood a man Laverne had seen only twice, Lee Seong-ho. 49, graphite suit even at this hour, the kind of man who dressed before he was fully awake. Junho's uncle. He ran things now, people said, in the space the young boss left when the young boss was away, and the young boss was always away. There she is, Song-ho said, and his social smile arrived on schedule. The famous housekeeper. Laverne said nothing. She had learned that men who called you famous wanted a reaction to feed on. "We're clearing this room," Heiress said. She towed one of the boxes. "All of it. My grandfather hoarded like a peasant." "It's an embarrassment." "Clearing it where?" Laverne asked. "The incinerator's cold. There's a burn pit behind the greenhouse." Heiress smiled. "Weather's clear tomorrow night. We'll make an evening of it." The word landed and kept falling. "Burn?" Laverne's eyes went to the ledgers, to the suits, to the trunk with the green corners. and she felt the folded thing in her chest come loose one notch. Some of this might be worth— It's worth nothing, Seong-ho said, gently, the way you correct a child. Old paper, old cloth, sentiment. He crouched by a box and lifted the flap, and Laverne watched his eyes move over the ledgers, quick, sorting, the way a man looks for one specific thing among many. He let the flap fall. All of it burns. Hye-rin was already bored again. She pulled a garment bag half off the rack, and under it, on a lower shelf, folded in tissue that had yellowed, was a navy dress with a white collar, and a hem, at the left side, mended in stitches a shade too dark, because someone long ago had run out of matching thread. The old uniform. Not hers. Hers was in her closet, folded in fresh tissue. This was another one, a twin, and Laverne had not known it existed, and the sight of it stopped the breath in her throat. Keep the old one, the one with the mended hem. There had been two. That one, Laverne said, and her voice came out steadier than she was. The blue dress. May I keep it, for rags? Hye-rin followed her look, picked up the folded uniform between two fingers, like something found in a drain. This filthy thing? For rags, Laverne said again. And she saw it happen, saw Hye-rin's eyes flick to Seong-ho, and saw Seong-ho give the smallest shake of his head, a movement so slight that a person not watching for it would have missed it entirely. Laverne had spent 6 years watching for it. No, Hye-rin said, dropping the uniform back onto the shelf. It burns with the rest. Grandfather's ghosts, all of them, gone by Saturday. She stepped over a box. You'll pack the room tomorrow, every last scrap, and then you'll help us light it. She left. Seong-ho lingered a half-second longer than he needed to, his gaze moving once more across the ledgers, and then he buttoned his jacket, though it was already buttoned, and followed her out. Laverne stood alone in the dead man's room. She crossed to the shelf and lifted the uniform herself, held it, the mended hem, the dark thread. She turned it over in the lamplight and found, low on the inside of the left pocket, a shape that was not cloth. Small, hard, flat, sewn in, footsteps in the corridor. She folded the dress and set it back exactly as it had lain, tissue and all, and stepped away from the shelf, and when the night porter passed the door she was stacking boxes, apron on, face empty, a woman doing what she was told. But her heart was going like a fist on a door. The porter's steps faded. She stayed among the boxes a moment longer, hands moving on their own, stacking, squaring corners, the motions of a woman who had made a career of looking busy so that no one asked what she was thinking. And she thought, 2 dresses. He had made 2, or kept 2, and hidden the second where a family that despised sentiment would never look, in a storeroom of things they meant to throw away. He had trusted the family's contempt to protect it. He had been right for 11 months. He would be right for 2 days more, and then Seong-ho would put a match to the only proof of whatever those women had been, and the shape in the hem would burn with it unless she moved first. She lifted a box that did not need lifting and carried it to the far wall and set it down and let her hand rest flat on the lid and made herself a small promise to go with the old man's. Not Saturday, before Saturday. She did not sleep. She sat on the narrow bed in the staff wing and turned the promise over the way she'd turned the pocket. Keep the old one. He had known. Whatever was sewn into that hem, whatever those ledgers were that Seong-ho wanted burned before the sun came up twice. Dong-wook had known, and dying, he had handed one thread of it to the only person in the house no one would think to watch. Once, around 4, she took her phone from the drawer and started a message to her sister. If anything happens to my job, she typed and then stopped and looked at the words and deleted them one letter at a time. Her sister had insulin to buy and a boy to raise, and no room in her life for a housekeeper's suspicions 4,000 miles away. Some weights you did not hand to people who were already carrying you. She put the phone back and sat in the dark and listened to the house breathe. A rich house at night has a particular sound, she had learned. The settle of expensive wood, the hum of systems keeping wine and art at the right temperature, the small mechanical loyalty of a building to the people who owned it and not to the people who cleaned it. She had never once felt the house was hers. She felt, tonight, that it was watching her back. At 6, she was in the kitchen starting the coffee, because the day did not stop for what she'd found. At 7, Heiress came down dressed for the city, and she was smiling. And a smiling Heiress was worse than a cruel one. Laverne, leave the coffee, I have news. Laverne set down the pot. You know about the gala? Heiress leaned against the counter, delighted with herself. The Bay Foundation, Saturday night. Everyone in the city, all the old families, the couture, the whole circus. She pulled an envelope from her bag. Heavy cream stock, embossed, a real one. I've decided you should come. The kitchen went very quiet. Cook stopped stirring. The girl at the sink stopped rinsing. Come, Laverne said. As a guest. Heiress held the envelope out. Isn't that generous of me? 6 years of scrubbing my floors, and I'm putting your name on the list. You'll have your own invitation. You'll walk in the front like anybody. Her eyes shone. Wouldn't your poor nephew love to hear that? His aunt, at the Bay Gala. Laverne looked at the envelope and did not take it. There was no version of Heiress that gave a gift. There was only Heiress finding a new place to make her kneel. But the envelope was real. She could see her own name on it, printed. Laverne St. Clair. And something in her that had knelt on cold floors for 6 years wanted, stupidly, to hold a thing with her name printed on it in gold. Why? She said instead. Heiress' smile didn't move. Does a gift need a why? From you it does. Something flickered behind the heiress's eyes. Not anger, worse, amusement, the look of a card player holding a hand you can't see. Take the invitation, Laverne. Saturday, 8 o'clock. Wear something nice. She set it on the counter when Laverne wouldn't take it. Or don't come, and spend your life wondering what it would have been like to walk through a door instead of around to the back of it. She left. Her car pulled out of the gate and Laverne stood looking at the cream envelope on the counter with her name in gold, and did not touch it, because everything in her 6 years of watching told her that the door was a trap and the only question left was what kind. What Laverne could not see, because it happened in a car crossing the bridge into the city, was Heiress lowering her phone from her ear and saying to the driver she took the bait, when Laverne had taken nothing at all. And what she could not hear was the call itself. Song-ho, in his own car, on the other end. She'll come? She'll come, Heiress said. And even if she doesn't, the invitation does its work. The whole house knows she's been invited. The whole house will assume she's upstairs Saturday getting ready, not in that storeroom. A pause. You're sure the paper's still in there? The ledgers are in there. He was too sentimental to destroy them, and too careful to bank them. Seong-ho's voice was calm as a closed drawer. The gala empties the mansion. Family in the city, staff serving. 3 hours, minimum, with only the woman's room and the storeroom unwatched, and the woman herself standing in a ballroom across town wondering why she was invited. And her room? My man has a reason to be in the service wing Saturday. He'll go through her things while she's out. If the old fool left anything with her, a key, a note, anything, we find it before she does. A dry sound that was almost a laugh. She thinks she's been handed a night off. She's been handed a way out of the building. Heiress watched the city rise up gray in the windshield. She's not stupid, uncle. She looks at everything twice. Then let her look, Seong-ho said. There's nothing to see. A cruel girl inviting a servant to a party to humiliate her. Everyone in that house will believe it, because everyone in that house has watched you do worse for less. The line hummed. Play your part, niece. Be petty. Be obvious. The more it looks like spite, the less it looks like what it is. The call ended. In the mansion behind them, Laverne still had not touched the envelope. She touched it at noon. Not because she wanted the party, because the shape sewn into that hem would not leave her, and because Song-ho wanted the storeroom empty and burned by Saturday night, and because a woman who understood nothing else understood this. They had given her a reason to be gone from the house on exactly the night the house would be empty enough to search. The gala was the door they wanted her walking through. Fine, she would learn why. She slid the invitation into the inside pocket of her apron, the one with the button, and she went back to the east storeroom, and she began to pack the dead man's life into boxes as ordered. She worked slowly. She listened for footsteps. And when the corridor was quiet, she went to the shelf and lifted the mended uniform out of its yellowed tissue and carried it, folded small under a stack of towels, back to her own room in the staff wing, and she laid it in the closet beside its twin, the one Dongwook had made her promise on, and she stood looking at the two navy dresses side by side. Two uniforms, one promise, one thing sewn into a hem. She thought of Josiah on the phone, the crack in the second word, the $400 that had felt, an hour ago, like the largest number in her world. It did not feel large now. Now there was a room full of a dead man's proof and a man in a graphite suit who wanted it ash by Saturday, and a boy in Newark who would never know his aunt had stood in a closet in another country deciding whether to be brave. She wanted, badly, to call someone. There was no one to call. The old man who would have understood was in the ground. The nephew who loved her could not be handed this. The boss of the house was a rumor she had met twice, a name people lowered their voices around. The Phoenix, they called him. Lee Jun-ho, always away, always elsewhere. A young man who had inherited a machine and left his uncle to run it. He was nothing to her. He did not know her flaws from anyone's. Two uniforms in a closet, one woman who had learned to keep her face empty. It would have to be enough. Her hands wanted to open the seam right then, find the hard flat shape and know it, but her hands had learned patience, the way her knees had learned floors, and she made herself stop. Not here. Not with the house awake and Song-ho's man already, maybe, watching the service wing. If they searched her room Saturday and found a seam torn open, they would know she knew. So she folded the towels back over both dresses and closed the closet and went down to serve lunch with her face empty and her heart loud. That afternoon she found the ledgers still in the storeroom, and though she could read the Korean only in pieces, she recognized numbers, columns of them, and names, and at the top of one page a word she did know because Dongwook had said it to her once with pride, back when his hands were steady, the name of a place, a cooperative, a workshop of women in navy dresses who had sewn something the whole city once wanted. He had built it. And then, somewhere in the years before she came, it had vanished. The women scattered, the name gone from every mouth in the house. She was reading the same page a second time when Song-ho's shadow fell across the doorway. Still working? The social smile. Diligent. Laverne set the ledger down on the pile, casual, as if it were only the next thing to box. Almost done, sir. His eyes went to the ledger, then to her, then to the ledger again. These especially, he said, the books. They go to the pit first. Old accounts, bad memories. He crouched, lifted one, weighed it in his hand exactly the way he had weighed the thought of her. You can read our language now? Numbers only, sir. Numbers only. He set the book down, stood, buttoned the buttoned jacket. Enjoy the party Saturday, Laverne. I hear the bay woman spares no expense. He paused at the door. It's not every servant who gets to walk in the front. Then he was gone, and Laverne stood among the boxes with her pulse in her ears, and understood two things at once, that the ledgers were what he wanted burned, and that he had just told her, without meaning to, that he did not yet know the old uniform had a hem, or that the hem had a shape, or that both dresses now lay folded in a housekeeper's closet under a stack of towels. She had one thing he wanted, and did not know she had. She had until Saturday. She finished boxing the room as the light went orange in the high windows, and she stacked the ledgers last, on top, where they could be carried out first to the pit, and where, that night, when the house slept and the porter dozed, she meant to come back and photograph every page she could before the fire took them. She turned off the storeroom light. In the corridor, the cream envelope with her name in gold sat heavy in the buttoned pocket over her heart, a door someone had opened for her on purpose, and she walked toward the staff wing, already deciding exactly how she would walk through it. She waited until the house went to sleep before she went back for the ledgers. The corridor lights ran on a timer that cut to half at midnight, and Laverne had counted the seconds between the porter's rounds for 6 years without ever needing the number. Now she needed it. 40 minutes. She had 40 minutes between the far door closing and the far door opening again, and she spent the first 10 of them standing very still in the storeroom, letting her eyes learn the dark. The ledgers were where she'd stacked them, on top, deliberately, so she wouldn't have to dig. She'd brought her phone and a dish towel. The towel was for the flash. She draped it over the lamp on the shelf, turned the lamp on low, and the room went the color of weak tea. Enough to read by, not enough to bleed under the door. She opened the first ledger and photographed it page by page. Her thumb found a rhythm. Turn, hold, tap, turn, hold, tap. The columns meant nothing to her in words, and everything to her in shape. The same account numbers marching down the left, the same 3 or 4 names copied across the top of each new year, and then, in the last book, the names thinning. 1 year the workshop had 40 entries. 3 years later it had 6. Then it had a single line, and then a line drawn under the single line, and then nothing. Somebody had closed the cooperative one name at a time. She photographed that page twice. A board settled somewhere above her, the ordinary complaint of an old house cooling, and her whole body went to stone until it passed. She checked the time, 19 minutes gone. She kept turning. Near the back of the last ledger a page had been torn out. Not lost, torn, the stub of it still caught in the seam, the edge clean where a hand had pulled fast. Laverne ran her finger down the stub and felt the ridge of it, and on the facing page, pressed through from the missing sheet, the ghost of numbers she couldn't read. She photographed the ghost. Then she squared the stack exactly as she'd found it, killed the lamp, folded the towel into her apron, and was 3 steps into the corridor when the far door opened early. She did not run. She bent, instead, as if she'd dropped something, and when the porter's flashlight swung across the wall, she was on one knee with her hand flat on the floor, feeling for nothing. "Something down here," she said. "Thought I heard a mouse." The porter grunted. Old man, tired, uninterested in mice. The light moved off her and away, and she stayed down until his footsteps turned the corner, and then she got up and walked the other way with her heart going like a fist on a door. In her room, she sat on the edge of the bed with the phone face down in her lap and made herself breathe. 211 photographs. She scrolled them once, fast, to be sure they'd taken. They had. The tea-colored pages slid past her thumb, and she stopped on the torn stub and looked at it a long time. Whatever had been on that page, someone had wanted it gone badly enough to leave the scar. She backed the photographs up to her sister's old email, the one they'd shared for the insulin receipts, and she wrote no message with them, just the images, into a folder no one looked at, behind a password her sister had forgotten years ago. Then she deleted them from the phone. If they searched her room, and she was beginning to feel, in the base of her spine, that searching was exactly what this was all for, they'd find a cleaner's phone with pictures of her nephew and nothing else. She lay down without undressing. Across the closet, folded in tissue, 2 navy uniforms lay side by side with their mended hems touching, and somewhere in the left pocket of one of them, a small hard shape waited to be understood. She did not open it. She'd decided that already, and deciding it again cost her something each time. The seam was safest closed. A closed seam told no one anything. She slept 2 hours and woke before the alarm. Friday passed like a held breath. Heiress was gentle all day, which was worse than the cruelty. She said good morning. She asked, at lunch, whether Laverne had found something to wear, and she smiled when Laverne said she'd manage, and the smile had a floor under it that Laverne couldn't see the bottom of. Twice she caught Seong-ho watching the storeroom door. Once she caught him watching her. At 3, the burn crew came to measure the pit behind the greenhouse. She watched them from the pantry window, 2 men with a wheelbarrow and a coil of hose, pacing off the distance from the greenhouse wall, driving a stake. Saturday night. Everything Dongwook had touched, into the fire, while the family stood in a gala across the city with champagne going warm in their hands. And she would be there too, in the gala, out of the house. That was the part she turned over and over. They wanted her out of the house. The invitation with her name in gold was not a kindness, and it was not even really an insult. It was a door held open so that while she walked through it, someone could walk through hers. She just didn't yet know what they thought she had. She thought about not going. She stood in the pantry with the stake going into the ground beyond the glass, and she thought, I could stay. I could be sick. I could sit in my own room Saturday night with the 2 uniforms in my lap and dare them to come in. But the uniforms would burn if she stayed. The storeroom would burn. Whatever the torn page had said would be ash by Sunday, and the only proof of anything would be 200 photographs in a dead woman's email and 1 hard shape she hadn't the courage to cut out. If she wanted to save any of it, she had to be seen leaving. So she'd leave loud and come back quiet, and she'd carry the uniform out with her under her own coat, where no searcher would think to look, because who searches the maid on her way to a party? That was the plan. It was a thin plan. It was the only one she had. Saturday came the way dread always comes, all at once and then unbearably slowly. She dressed in the plain black she kept for funerals, the one good dress she owned, and she stood in front of the small mirror and pinned her braids up off her neck and looked at a woman going to a party she had not been invited to for any reason she'd like. She'd meant to carry the uniform out that night. She'd folded it small, wrapped in a plastic laundry bag, and she reached for it and then stopped, with her hand on the closet shelf. If they searched while she was gone, and the uniform was gone too, they'd know she knew. Better to leave it. Leave both. Let them find 2 old dresses in a maid's closet and think nothing, because a maid keeping old work clothes for rags was the most invisible thing in the world. She'd come back for it. She'd come back after the gala, when the searching was done and the house was full of people too drunk to notice a cleaner going to her own room. She left the uniforms where they lay and slid the closet shut. The car came at 7. Not for her, for the family. Heiress swept down the stairs in red, and Sung-ho followed in graphite with his overcoat over his arm, and they moved past Laverne in the front hall as if she were a coat stand until Heiress stopped at the door and turned. "You'll want to take your own way," Heiress said. "Pleasant. The foundation's very particular. Guests through the front, of course. But there's a system for arrivals like yours." She held out a second small card Laverne hadn't seen before, cream like the invitation, a line of address printed on it. "Show them this. They'll know where to put you." Laverne took the card. On the back, in small type, "Service and vendor entrance, rear." "You said the front," Laverne said. "Did I?" Heiress's eyes were bright and flat. "This is easier. Trust me." And she was gone into the car, and the car was gone down the drive, and Laverne stood in the empty hall holding 2 cards that said 2 different things and understood, finally and completely, that the invitation had never been meant to walk her through any front door. It had been meant to walk her out of this one. She looked back at the stairs, up toward her own shut closet, and for one long second, the whole house was silent around her, in a way that felt like being inside a held breath that wasn't hers. Somewhere in the dark upstairs, she thought, they've already told a man which room is mine. She could still stay. She looked at the gold card with her name on it, then she put both cards in her bag, and she walked out the front door herself, because if this was a trap she would rather spring it standing up than lie in her bed and wait for the ceiling to open. She almost turned back twice on the drive. The taxi cost her $22 she didn't have. She watched the meter climb and did the arithmetic she always did. 22 here, 22 back. A night's wage gone before she'd walk through any door. And each red digit felt like proof that she was being foolish, that a smart woman stayed home. Then she thought of the stake going into the ground behind the greenhouse, and she stopped watching the meter. The driver took the bridge. The city slid up out of the dark, all its towers lit, and Laverne sat in the back in her funeral black with her hands folded on her bag and rehearsed how she'd behave. Quiet, grateful, invisible. She'd take whatever small cruelty Heiress had built for her, she'd let it land, and while everyone laughed, she'd be memorizing exits and counting minutes until she could get home to her closet. That was the whole plan. Walk in, endure, walk out, come back for the uniform. It had never once occurred to her that she might not be allowed to endure quietly. The Bay Foundation stood behind a wall of hedges and light, a long white building strung with lamps, and the front of it was a river of black cars and camera flash, and women stepping down in dresses that cost more than Laverne made in a decade. She had the driver stop short of the lights. She got out into the noise and the cold, and stood on the pavement in her funeral black with the 2 cards in her fist. The front doors were 100 feet away, gold and open, guests flowing up the steps between 2 lines of staff. The service entrance was a gray door around the side, past the valet stand, down a ramp where the catering vans backed in. She looked at the gold doors a long moment. Then she walked toward the gray one, because she was still, in the marrow of her, a woman who used the door she'd been told to use, and because there was a thing she needed to see for herself before she believed it, and the gray door was where she'd see it. A man in a headset stopped her at the ramp. "Deliveries down the—" "I have this." She held up the vendor card. He glanced at it, glanced at her dress, and something in the mismatch made him pause. Name? Laverne St. Clair. He said the name into the headset, bored, and waited. And while he waited, Laverne watched the gray door and the people going in and out of it. Waiters, a woman with a garment rack, two men carrying a crated thing between them with great care. Ordinary service traffic. Nothing that explained why an heiress had gone to the trouble of sending a housemaid the long way around to a party the housemaid never asked to attend. Then the headset spoke, and the man's bored face changed. He looked at her differently. He looked at her the way you look at something you've just been told is more expensive than it appears. "Ma'am," he said, and the word came out uncertain, a man reaching for a register he wasn't used to using with someone coming up the delivery ramp. I've been asked to bring you up. Not this way. Would you? This way." "You said deliveries." "I've been asked," he said again, helpless, and held the gray door for her anyway, and Laverne stepped through it into a bright back corridor that smelled of hot canapes and cut flowers, and she thought, moving, that nothing about this night was going to go the way anyone had planned it, including her. The corridor bent, the catering noise fell behind, the floor changed from rubber matting to pale stone, and the light warmed, and a set of double doors opened ahead of them onto a small mirrored room that was not part of any kitchen. A woman was waiting in it. Small, upright, 70 if she was a day, in black silk with a coat structured across her shoulders and a jade brooch at her throat, one gloved hand resting on the head of a dark cane, silver gray hair, cut close and styled, eyes that took Laverne in from shoes to braids in one unhurried pass, and seemed to find, in the plain black funeral dress, something no one else in the building would have found there. "You came in the back," the old woman said. Her English was precise, lightly accented, amused. "Of course you did. She told you to." A short breath through the nose that might have been a laugh. "She has no idea what she's done." "I don't know you," Laverne said. "No," the woman's gaze steadied on her face. "But I know you. You knelt in a hotel lobby 3 winters ago and picked an old woman up off a marble floor before her own people could reach her, and you did not once look at whether anyone was watching you do it." The cane shifted. "I was watching. I remember hands." Laverne's own hands had gone cold around the strap of her cheap bag. She remembered the fall, a lobby, ice tracked in on someone's shoes, a small figure going down hard, and Laverne dropping her bags and getting there first. She had never learned the woman's name. She had never thought of it again. "Madame Bay," the old woman said, as if she'd heard the question. "This is my foundation. This is my gala." She tilted her head toward the mirrored room. "And tonight, it seems, you are going to be my guest of honor, though I suspect the girl who sent you here would rather die than know it." "I'm staff," Laverne said. "Someone made a mistake." "Someone made a great many mistakes, none of them yours." Madame Bay studied her. "You look like a woman who has come to a party expecting to be humiliated. Tell me I'm wrong." Laverne said nothing, which was its own answer. The old woman's mouth thinned. "They gave you a card that says vendor and a card that says guest, and they sent you through the door for the wine so that everyone who matters would see you turned away, and while you stood at that door being turned away, something was to happen at the house you keep." She was not asking. She watched Laverne's face while she said it, and Laverne felt the blood go out of her own cheeks and knew the old woman saw it go. "There. So I am not wrong about that either." "How do you—" "Because I am old," Madame Bay said, "and I have watched that family take things for 40 years, and I know the shape of a distraction when one walks in wearing it." She lifted the cane and pointed, once, at a door on the far side of the mirrored room. "But we are going to spoil the evening they had planned, not for revenge. I am too old for revenge. It takes too long. For accuracy." The word landed like a coin on stone. "Come. There is something back here I have kept a long time, and I have been waiting for the right shoulders." Laverne did not move. "I don't understand what's happening." "No," the old woman agreed, and for the first time, something in her face softened, an old kindness surfacing under the sharpness. "You've been kept from understanding on purpose, child, by people who needed you confused. I don't need you confused. I need you seen." She turned toward the far door, the cane tapping. "Now come and stand in front of a mirror with me, and let me put you in the one thing in this building that frightens them." The far door opened onto a fitting room hung in soft light, and in the center of it, on a form under a fall of muslin, stood something that changed the temperature of the air. Madame Bay drew the muslin away herself. Silver! A gown the color of moonlight on water. The bodice a structured corset stitched close with crystal and stone, so that even standing still, it moved with light. The skirt falling long and clean to a controlled slit at the front. A cape fixed at the shoulders to pool behind like spilled mercury. It was not a dress. It was an argument. It stood in the room and argued with everything Laverne had been told about where she belonged. $2 million, if you believe the insurers, Madame Bay said, watching her look at it. They don't matter. What matters is what it means, and no one in that ballroom tonight knows what it means except me, and by the end of the night, you. She lifted a gloved hand toward it. It will fit you. I had the measurements the moment you walked in. I have been doing this since before your mother was born. Will you wear it? Laverne looked at the gown, then at the door behind her, the gray corridor, the party, the black cars, the house across the city, with its lights going out room by room. If I put that on, she said slowly, there's no walking back to the service entrance. No, said Madame Bay. There is not. They'll say I stole it. The old woman's eyes glittered. Oh, I am counting on it, she said softly. Let her say it. Let her say it in front of everyone, as loud as she likes. She set her cane against the mirror and reached for the first hook of the gown with steady, certain hands. I have the papers that answer her. I have kept them as long as I have kept the dress. But papers are quiet things, child, and a quiet answer is no answer at all in a room like this one. She glanced up, and there was iron under the kindness now. So first she must accuse you, loudly, where they can all hear, and then, somewhere beyond the walls, a swell of music rose, and the murmur of the arriving crowd deepened, hundreds of voices folding into one long sound, and under it, faint, the particular hush that runs through a room when someone important comes through a door. Madame Bay's hands paused on the hook. She listened, head tilted, reading the crowd the way she'd read Laverne. Ah, she said, he's here. Something moved across her old face. Calculation, and under it, the ghost of a smile she didn't let finish. Earlier than I thought. Good. He should see this from the beginning. Who? Laverne said. Who's here? The old woman looked at her in the mirror and did not answer the question, and instead lifted the shimmering weight of the gown and held it open. Arms up, she said. We haven't much time. When those doors open, you are going to walk out onto that carpet, and a young woman in red is going to look at you and forget, for one moment, everything she rehearsed. The gown came down over Laverne's raised arms, cool and heavy, closing around her like water. And in that one moment, everything they built in the dark is going to have to happen in the light instead. You keep saying they, Laverne said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Like you know exactly who. I know the uncle. Madame Bay's hands moved to the shoulders of the cape, settling the weight of it. I knew his brother-in-law before him, and the man before that. They are all the same man wearing different faces. They find a thing that was built to lift people up, and they hollow it out, and they keep the shell for the shine of it. Her gaze found Laverne's in the glass. Your Mr. O built a workshop once, women in navy. He built it to give women like you a floor to stand on, and when he died, someone spent a great deal of quiet money making sure that floor was never found again. She smoothed a crystal seam flat with her thumb. You have been standing on it your whole life, child, and they sent you to the service door so you wouldn't notice you were. Laverne's throat closed. She thought of the ledger thinning, 40 names to 6 to 1, to a line drawn under a line. She thought of the torn page and its ghost. Don't tell me things you can't prove, she said. It came out rough. I've had enough people tell me things. Good. Something like approval crossed the old woman's face. Then I won't tell you. I'll show you. But not tonight. And not until you've done the one thing only you can do, which is walk out there and be impossible to look away from. She reached to a velvet tray on the vanity and lifted a pair of earrings that caught the light and threw it. These are borrowed. So is the necklace. Everything on you tonight is borrowed except the one thing you brought yourself. She fixed the first earring gently. Which is the reason he chose you over every other woman who ever wore that uniform. He told me once. His best work, he called them. But you were the one who didn't flinch. The word went through Laverne like cold water. She had heard it before. in a dying man's room, in a promise about a mended hem. The necklace came next, cool against her collarbone, and the old woman's hands were unhurried and sure, and Laverne stood and let herself be dressed the way she had spent 6 years dressing other women's rooms. Except that this time the hands were kind, and this time the face in the mirror was her own. The hooks began to close, one after another, up the length of Laverne's spine. Beyond the wall, the music gathered. The crowd sound rose and turned toward the entrance and held its breath. And Laverne St. Clair stood in $2 million of silver in a mirrored room she'd been sent to the back door to avoid, with an old woman's certain hands closing the last hooks at her neck, and looked at her own face in the glass, the face she had trained for 6 years to keep empty, and watched it, for the first time in longer than she could remember, refused to stay empty at all. The last hook closed. "There," said Madame Bay, and stepped back, and turned Laverne by the shoulders to face the doors. "Now, chin where I can see it, and when they open." The doors opened. The light hit her first. It came in a long sheet off the chandeliers and the phone screens, and Laverne stood in it the way a person stands in cold water, holding still until the body decides whether to run. Bay's glove touched the small of her back, 1 inch of pressure. "Walk," she said, "not fast." Laverne walked. The corridor from the fitting room to the top of the stairs was short. It felt long. Her borrowed shoes were a half size too big, and Bay had packed the toes with tissue, and every step landed with that faint give, a reminder that none of this was hers. The gown moved when she moved. It did not cling, it carried. She reached the top of the stairs and the room below her stopped talking. Not all at once. In a wave, from the foot of the stairs outward, the way a pond goes quiet when something drops in the middle of it. 200 faces turned up. Silver everywhere, black everywhere, and one woman on the landing in a dress the color of a blade. Down on the floor, near the champagne table, Heiress turned last. Laverne watched it happen. Watched the red gown pivot. Watched the polished head lift. Watched the moment the recognition landed behind those eyes. Heiress's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. It stayed there. "There," Bay murmured, close to Laverne's ear. "Now she's looking. Keep your chin where I told you." The stairs had a brass rail. Laverne did not take it. She had scrubbed rails like this one for 6 years, and her hand knew the reflex, knew to reach, and she killed the reflex and let her arm hang, and came down the marble 1 step at a time with nothing to hold. 22 steps. She counted them without meaning to. At the 12th, a man in a gray tuxedo lowered his phone to see her better. At the bottom the crowd had made a lane. Nobody planned it. Bodies had simply moved back, the way bodies do around something they can't place, and the lane ran from the last stair to the center of the floor, and at the far end of it stood Heiress. Laverne stepped off the marble onto carpet. Deep red carpet. She understood the joke of that only later. Heiress set her glass down on a passing tray without looking at the tray. She came forward 3 steps into the lane and stopped, and when she spoke, her voice was pitched to carry, trained, bright, built for exactly this many listeners. "That's my grandmother's gown." The room heard it. The room was meant to. Laverne said nothing. Bay had told her to say nothing, and she found, standing there, that saying nothing was the easiest thing in the world, because her throat had closed, and words would not have come anyway. "That gown," Heiress lifted 1 finger, "elegant, certain. It was in our family vault. It has crystals set by hand. It is insured for $2 million, and it is on my housekeeper." She let the last word sit. She smiled at the people nearest her, inviting them in. "On my maid, who I have not seen since this morning, when she was cleaning my floors." A murmur moved through the near crowd. Somebody laughed once, short, uncertain. Laverne felt the old thing start in her chest, the kneeling thing. The thing that had lived in her body for 6 years and told her to drop her eyes and make herself small, and wait for it to pass. Her weight shifted toward her heels. Her shoulders wanted to come in. She held them where they were. It cost her. Nobody in the room could have known what it cost. "You don't answer?" Heiress took another step. Up close, her face was doing 2 things at once. The public mask, smooth and amused, and underneath it, something faster. Something that had not expected to be doing this here, tonight, in front of these people. "No, of course. What would you say?" She wouldn't say anything. Bay said. The old woman had come down the last stairs on her cane, unhurried, and now she moved into the lane beside Laverne, and the crowd's attention split and swung to her. Bay Sun Ja. People knew that face. People straightened for it. She wouldn't say anything, Bay said again, because she's a guest in my house tonight, and guests don't defend themselves against the help. A pause. Her gray head tilted toward Heiress. You'll do that for her, won't you, dear? Loudly. You've started so well. Heiress' smile held. Barely, Madame Bay, with respect. This woman has stolen. Say it again. Bay's voice did not rise. It went flat, which was worse. The whole word. Stolen. You want that word in the room. So do I. Say it clearly for the ones in the back. Something crossed Heiress' face. A hesitation. She was standing at the front of 200 people, and the most powerful woman in the room was handing her a shovel and telling her to dig, and every instinct she had trained said dig, and one older instinct, the one that had survived in her family for a long time, said stop. She dug. She stole it. Louder now, chin up, committed. This gown belongs to the O family. She took it out of our home. I want it back, and I want her removed. Good, said Bay. Thank you. She turned her back on Heiress. The whole room saw her do it, and lifted one gloved hand, and a young man in foundation black came out of the crowd with a flat leather folder held in both arms, like something that might spill. Bay did not open it herself. She had the young man open it and hold it up, turned outward, so the pages faced the crowd and the phones. This gown, she said, left the O collection 11 months ago, legally, on paper, signed. One gloved finger touched the top sheet without covering it. It was placed on loan to the Bay Foundation by Oh Dong-wook, the week before he died. His signature, his seal, witnessed by his own attorney, whose name you can all read, and who is standing. She did not look. She pointed the cane, and a bald man near the wall inclined his head. There. Silence. Different silence. The kind that comes right before a room decides something. The loan names a condition. Bay let the young man turn the page. The gown may be worn once, in public, by a guest of honor of my choosing. She turned then, slow on the cane, and faced Laverne, and in front of everyone she reached up and touched the crystal at the center of the corset bodice with one finger, the way you touch a thing to claim it out loud. I chose her. This is her honor. It is documented. It is legal. And the only person in this room using that gown against the wishes of the man who made it. She turned the cane, without hurry, and pointed it at Heiress. Is you. Heiress did not move for a full second. Then color came up her neck, above the red satin, a different red, the kind the body makes on its own. That's a forgery, she said. His attorney is by the wall, Bay said. Ask him. My grandfather was ill. He was clear-headed to the hour he died. I sat with him. Were you there? Bay let the question hang. She already knew the answer. So did half the room, and Heiress' silence told the other half. No, you weren't. You were arranging things. Somewhere in the crowd a phone was recording, then 10 phones. Then it did not matter how many, because the number had passed the point where any of them could be stopped, and Heiress' mouth was open, and nothing useful was coming out of it. Laverne watched the woman who had made her re-clean a window at 3 a.m. stand in the middle of 200 people with no floor left under her feet, and felt, not triumph. She waited for triumph and it did not come. What came was stranger and quieter, a kind of vertigo, the sense of a wall she had leaned against her whole adult life turning out to be a door, and the door standing open, and cold air coming through. She was still standing in that when the room's attention moved again. It moved toward the doors at the far end. The main doors, the tall ones, that had been shut. They were open now, and a man stood in them, and the light behind him made him a shape before it made him a face. The murmur that went through the crowd this time had a different texture, lower. It carried a name the way wind carries smoke, in pieces, not all at once. Lee. The Phoenix. That's him. And the people nearest the doors did the thing Laverne had watched them do for Bay, except more so. They did not straighten, they cleared. He came down the room without hurrying, and without seeming to notice he was being watched, which is its own kind of noticing. Black tuxedo, black vest, The collar of his shirt sat where it sat, and above it, on the left of his throat, the dark shape ran up under his jaw toward his ear and vanished. Laverne had seen him twice in her life, both times across rooms, both times for less than a minute. She had never been close enough to see that his eyes moved slower than everyone else's, taking a thing in fully before releasing it. They took her in fully. Then they released her and went to bay. Madame, he stopped an arm's length from the old woman and inclined his head. Precise, the exact depth owed, and not a degree more. You started without me. You were late, Bay said. I was watching from the mezzanine, a flicker at the corner of his mouth, gone before it finished. You do this better without help. I know, Bay's cane tapped once on the marble, but there's a part you're better at than I am. Do it. He turned his head, slow, again. His gaze crossed the folder, crossed the attorney by the wall, crossed Heiress, and stopped on Heiress for exactly long enough that she felt it, and could do nothing with it, and came, last, to Laverne. Up close he was taller than the rumor. She had to lift her chin to hold his eyes, and she remembered Bay's instruction, chin where I can see it, and realized she was already obeying it for a different reason. Miss St. Clair, he said. He knew her name, not the printed gold name from the invitation. Her name, in his mouth, unhurried, as though he had known it before tonight. She said nothing. It was becoming her weapon, and she was learning to use it. He did not seem to need an answer. He turned, so that he stood beside her and slightly forward, and offered his arm. Not a gesture at her, a structure, the forearm out, the angle set, the whole thing built and held and waiting, in front of everyone, for her hand. The room understood before Laverne did. She heard the intake of breath run around the walls. There are people here, Junho said, low, meant for her, and not for them, who will decide what they saw tonight based on the next 10 seconds. His arm did not waver. Take it or don't, but decide now. Laverne looked at the offered arm. She thought of the taxi she couldn't afford, and the $800 she'd sent, and the window with no streak on it. She thought that this man's family owned the house she scrubbed, that his uncle wanted a stack of ledgers burned to ash by Saturday night, that she did not know, standing here, whether the arm in front of her was a rescue or a leash. She took it. She put her hand on his forearm and felt the warmth come through the fabric and heard, distinctly, in the new silence, the sound of 200 people rearranging in their heads everything they had thought 30 seconds ago. Louder, Junho said, not to her, to the room, lifting his voice for the first time so that it reached the back. For anyone still confused, he turned them both a quarter circle, unhurried, so the phones could see. This is Madame Bay's guest of honor. She came on my family's invitation, and she stands here on my arm. Anyone who calls her a thief tonight is calling my house liars. The pause was surgical. Is anyone? Nobody was. Heiress stood 8 feet away with her empty hands and her wrong story, and watched the man whose ring her family had spent a year trying to secure hold out his arm to the housekeeper, and Laverne, close enough now, saw the exact instant the public mask failed. A single crack, quick, the eyes going wide and wet and furious all at once, and then saw Heiress rebuild it, fast, professional, because a Heiress did not fall apart in a lit room. You'll regret this, Heiress said, quiet, only for the 3 of them. The bright carrying voice was gone. What was under it was thin and cold and finally honest. Maybe, Junho said, just as quiet, not looking at her. Not tonight. He walked Laverne forward, into the room, away from Heiress, and the crowd opened for the 2 of them, the way it had opened for him, and closed behind, and Heiress was on the wrong side of the closing. They walked. Laverne kept her hand on his arm, because letting go now would have been its own headline, and she matched his pace because his pace was slow and deliberate and gave her time to breathe, and she understood after a few steps that the slowness was for her, that he had said it for her, and she did not know how to feel about a kindness that was also a piece of theater. You're not going to ask why, he said. No. Everyone asks why. I know why. She kept her eyes forward, on the moving wall of faces. You needed a bigger show than she did. I'm the show. His arm did not react, but his stride broke, one beat, a hitch so small she felt it more than saw it, and then recovered. That's part of it, he said. Which part isn't? He didn't answer that. A waiter crossed their path with a tray, and Junho took 2 glasses without slowing and put one in her free hand, and the small, ordinary transaction gave the nearest phones a picture: the boss, the guest of honor, champagne, ease, and Laverne understood that too, that even the drink was a sentence in a paragraph he was writing in real time for the room to read. You do this a lot, she said. Do what? Turn people into sentences. The corner of his mouth moved again. That half thing. You noticed fast. I've been furniture in rooms like this for 6 years. She lifted the glass an inch, did not drink. Furniture notices everything. Nobody watches the furniture watch. They had reached a quieter pocket of the floor, near a column, where the crowd thinned and the music from the far end came softer. He stopped there. He turned to face her, and for the first time since the doors he seemed to look at her as a person and not as a placement, and the slow eyes went over her face the way they had gone over the room, taking it in fully before releasing it. My grandfather-in-law that never was, he said. Oh Dongwook, you worked in his house. I work in his granddaughter's house now. You knew him. A little. She held his gaze. Bei's warning was in her somewhere. A quiet answer is no answer in that room. But this was not that room anymore. This was 2 people and a column. He was kind to me. He was the only one who was. Something moved behind Junho's face. Not sympathy. Attention. The kind of attention that sharpens. He kept things, Junho said, carefully. Feeling the ground, papers, records, a workshop that mattered to him. Laverne's hand tightened on the champagne glass. 1 degree. She made it let go. Why are you asking me that? She said. Not a question. The same trick Heirin had used, turned around. Because, Junho said, my uncle spent this afternoon making sure a house was empty. His voice had gone very level. And I spent this afternoon finding out which house and why and who was supposed to be out of it. The slow eyes did not leave hers. You were supposed to be out of it, Miss St. Clair. That's the part of the show that isn't a show. The floor tilted under her again, the cold air through the open door. She had come here understanding one thing, that the invitation was a lever to move her out of the mansion. She had thought Bei was the only one who knew it. Now the man on whose arm she stood was telling her he knew it too, had known it this afternoon, had known while she was in the taxi rehearsing how to be small. You knew they were going to search my room, she said, flat. I knew someone was going to search a room. A muscle worked in his jaw. I didn't know it was yours until I saw your name on that gown tonight. Bei's people move faster than mine. And you let it happen. I let a lot of things happen. No apology in it. Some of them I'm going to unhappen. That depends on you. On me. On what my grandfather-in-law gave you to keep. There it was, laid on the marble between them, plain. Laverne stood very still. Every part of her that had learned to survive in the O house was screaming one word. Careful. And she listened to it. Because this man had just admitted, without blinking, that he had known she was being used and had allowed it, and now, in the same breath, warm and slow and reasonable, he was asking her for the one thing she had that anyone wanted. He gave me a job, she said. That's all. The half-smile came, and this time it stayed a second longer, and it was almost, something like respect. You're a bad liar, Junho said, gently, which is strange, because you've clearly had practice. I'm a good liar. She set the untouched champagne on the column's ledge. I just don't waste it on people who already know the answer. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The music turned over. Across the room, past his shoulder, she could see Bei working the crowd with her cane and her jade brooch, planting the story deeper with every handshake, and she could see, further off, near the champagne table where she'd started, the red gown moving fast toward the doors. Yerin, leaving, or pretending to leave, one hand already at her ear with a phone. Junho followed her eyes, turned back. She's calling my uncle, he said. To tell him it went wrong. To tell him it went very wrong. He stepped a half-pace closer and dropped his voice under the music. Which means by the time you go home tonight, they'll know the search didn't find what they wanted, and they'll know why the room was full of people watching you instead of empty. And Song-ho, he said the name the way you set down something heavy, does not like an audience for his work. Then he shouldn't have thrown a party, Laverne said. That got her the first real thing out of him, not the half-smile. A short breath through the nose, almost a laugh, quickly gone. He looked at her a beat longer than he needed to. You should not go back to that house tonight, he said. I have to. Everything I own is in that house. And one thing I don't own? She did not say. 2 things folded in tissue in a closet, and whatever's sewn in a pocket I haven't opened. I have places you could… No. It came out fast and hard, faster than she meant, and she saw it register. I don't get in cars I don't know the destination of. I learned that 6 years ago, the day I took this job. He absorbed it. He did not push. That, more than the arm, more than the champagne, was the thing that made her recalibrate him one notch. That when she put a wall up, he studied the wall instead of climbing it. All right, he said. Then take this instead. He reached into the inside of his jacket and she tensed, and what he brought out was only a card. Matte black, no name, 1 number embossed. He held it out the way he'd held out his arm, offered and waiting. That reaches me, he said. Not my house, not my uncle. Me. You call it, someone comes, and I promise you the person who comes will not be the person who restitched anything in your room tonight. Laverne went cold in a specific place. What did you say? He watched her. He had said it on purpose. She saw that now. He had dropped the phrase like a stone to see the ripple, the way she had dropped. Why are you asking me that? And she had rippled, and he had seen it. I said, Junho murmured, that the man my uncle sent to your room does careful work. He puts things back. He restitches what he opens, so you won't know he opened it. The slow eyes held hers, steady, almost sorry. You'll want to check the linings of things you thought were safe, Miss St. Clair. Tonight, before you sleep. Check the seams. She did not take the card. She was afraid, suddenly, absurdly, that taking it would be a signature on a document she hadn't read. Why are you telling me this? She said. 3rd time. It was becoming a prayer. Because my uncle burns a pit behind a greenhouse on Saturday, Junho said, and I would like to know what's supposed to be in it before it's ash. And because you're the only person alive that Oh Dong-wook trusted with something, and I've just watched you lie to my face about it without blinking, which tells me it's real, and it's still out there, and you still have it. He set the card on the column ledge beside her untouched glass, since she would not take it from his hand. And because whatever my family did to that workshop, I didn't do it, and I'm the only Lee in this room who can prove that. But I can't prove it without what you're carrying, and you can't survive Saturday without what I'm offering. That's the whole of it. That's the engine. The word landed strangely. Engine. As though he had read the same map she had, the one that turned people into moving parts. Laverne looked at the black card on the ledge. She looked at the man who had let her be used and had come, on the same night, to warn her about the using. 2 things that should not fit in one person. Fitting. Behind him the red gown reached the far doors and passed through them and was gone, and Laverne knew, with the flat certainty of someone who had spent 6 years learning the rhythms of that house, that the quiet part of the night was over, and something faster was starting, and that it would be waiting for her when she crossed the bridge home. Check the seams, she repeated, barely a whisper. Tonight, he said. She reached out. She did not take his hand, and she did not take his promise. She took the card. It weighed nothing. It felt, in her fingers, exactly as heavy as the flat, hard shape sewn into a pocket she had refused to open, folded in tissue in a closet in a house that someone had spent the whole evening emptying just for her. She closed her hand around it and lifted her chin, where he could see it, and said the only true thing she had said all night. If you're lying to me, Laverne said, you'd better be lying better than she did. And somewhere across the bridge, in a dark room she had left tidy that morning, a drawer stood a 1/4 inch open that she had shut all the way, and neither of them, standing under the chandeliers, knew yet that the seam Junho had told her to check had already been checked, and restitched, and left waiting for her hand. Bay's cane found Laverne's elbow before Laverne saw her cross the floor. The old woman steered her 2 steps behind the column, out of the phones, into a pocket of quiet the party hadn't reached yet. Junho let her go. He watched them move and stayed where he was, the black card gone from the ledge, one champagne glass still full. He offered you a number, Bei said, not a question. He offered 10 seconds. And you took the card. I took the card. Bei's mouth moved, not quite a smile. She tapped the marble twice with the cane. Then take one more thing from me first, before you go back to that house and start believing the boy's version of it. Laverne didn't answer. She let the woman lead. They went down a short hall that smelled of ice and cut stems, into a room the caterers hadn't claimed. One table, one lamp, the same leather folder the assistant had shown the crowd, turned toward her now, the loan papers lifted off the top. Underneath was a photograph. Not the one from Dong-wook's office. Older, the color gone toward yellow, the same low brick building, the same row of women in navy. But this frame had a banner strung above the door, and in the corner, pinned to the mat, a small printed card, a catalog cover, a silver dress on it. The dress on Laverne's body right now. You're wearing a catalog, Bei said. Laverne looked down at the crystal at her own waist, then back at the card. The dress in the tiny cover photo had the same corset, the same cape fixed at the shoulder, the same controlled slit. Someone had photographed this gown, once, and printed it small and handed it out. He didn't lend the foundation an heirloom, Bei said. He lent me a receipt. Explain that. The workshop made this dress. Bei set one gloved finger on the catalog card. 40 women. Coats, uniforms, alterations for houses that paid and houses that didn't. That was the honest front, and it fed people. But once a year, Dong-wook let them make one thing that wasn't for hire, to prove what their hands could do when nobody rationed the thread. This is the last one. There is one. It is on you. Laverne's hand came off the crystal. Every entry in that catalog had a number, Bei went on. The catalog and the ledgers used the same numbers. Match a dress to a line, to a year, to a name. Nobody could disappear the women without disappearing the numbers, and nobody could disappear the numbers without someone noticing a $2 million dress with no paperwork. So they kept the dress. They lost the dress. Bei's finger lifted. 11 months ago, a sick man sent it here in a crate with a lawyer and a loan agreement, and told me to hold it until the numbers went missing, then to put it on a woman who wouldn't flinch and walk her down a staircase full of phones. I thought he'd lost his mind. He had 11 days left. He was very clear. The lamp buzzed. Somewhere past the door, the party rose and fell like water. You photographed the ledgers, Bei said. Laverne went still, in a way she hadn't all night. She had told no one. She had buried them in an email behind a dead password. I didn't say I did. You have the face of a person who did. Bei leaned on the cane. Numbers thinning out. 40 to 6 to 1. To a line under a line. A page torn from the back. Am I close? You're close. Those numbers match the numbers on the back of this catalog. The catalog is the key to the ledger, and the ledger is the map of the theft, and the theft is not petty. Sung-ho erased 40 women off the books of the O estate and moved what they were worth into accounts that read like nothing, one name at a time, slow enough that a dying man saw it and couldn't stop it. The torn page is where his own number appears. He took it out. He didn't know it left a ghost on the facing sheet. Laverne heard her own voice come out low. Then he doesn't need the ledgers to burn because they name the women. He needs them to burn because they name him. Now you understand what you carry. I don't carry the ledgers. I carry pictures of them. You carry the only pictures of them. Bei closed the folder over the photograph, gentle, like shutting a book on a sleeping child. The ledgers themselves are stacked in a storeroom that gets emptied into a fire pit tonight. By morning, the paper is smoke. The catalog he thinks was destroyed with the workshop. The dress he thinks is an heirloom his granddaughter can wave around. He has spent 11 months making sure nothing that matches anything survives. And every piece he thinks he destroyed is either in your telephone or on your body or sewn into a maid's closet in his own house. That was when Laverne stopped listening to the room. Because Bei had said sewn. What do you know about the closet? Laverne said. Nothing. You've told me nothing. Bei watched her. But you flinched just now for the first time tonight. And it wasn't at 40 women. It was at a word. So there is something in that closet, and you left it there, and the house is empty, and the fire is tonight. She let the cane take her weight. I told you not to go believing the boy's version before you heard mine. That's the whole of it. Go believe your own. Laverne was already turning. She got as far as the door before Junho's shape filled it. He'd followed. Of course he'd followed. He had the second champagne glass in his hand still, untouched, and he held it out to the side like a thing he'd forgotten he was carrying, and set it on a tray as he came in, and his eyes went from Bay to Laverne to the closed folder, and read the room in one pass. You told her, he said to Bay. I told her what's true. You told her what's useful. She can hold both. There isn't time for both. He looked at Laverne. How far is the house? 20 minutes. More at this hour. Less in my car. I told you. Laverne's chin came up. I don't get in cars I don't know the destination of. You know this one. It goes to the exact place you're already running to. He didn't move toward her. That was the thing she filed away. He stood in the door and let her decide. Again, the way he'd let her decide about his arm. There's a man at that house tonight. He came in while the family was here, watching you come down the stairs. That was the arithmetic. Empty the house, send everyone here, leave one careful man alone with your room and a pair of scissors. You keep saying careful. A warning, not a compliment. He opens a seam and closes it so clean you'd hang the coat back up and never know your own hands didn't do the stitching. He's done it in 4 houses. Twice the people never found what he took. Once they found it and it was the wrong thing, planted, because he'd swapped it. Junho's jaw set. So whatever's in that closet, if it's still there, it might not be what you left. The lamp buzzed. The room narrowed to one thought. 2 uniforms, folded in tissue, side by side, one with the shape sewn in the pocket. She had left them because a maid keeping rags is invisible. She'd been so sure the invisibility was hers. I need to change, she said. You need to leave now. I'm not walking into that house in $2 million of a dead man's proof. She was already reaching behind her for the cape's fixing. Where's what I came in? Bay answered before Junho could. In the mirrored room, folded. Your coat is there too. My coat. You handed it to a man at the service door. He gave it to me. Bay's gaze flicked, once, to the folder, to the dress, to the maid inside it. I keep things until they matter. Laverne went. 2 of Bay's women lifted the gown off her while she stood with her arms out like a child being undressed, her eyes on the coat over the chair, the gray wool she'd worn across the bridge in a taxi she couldn't afford, shrugged off at the gray door 2 hours and a lifetime ago. Her own clothes went back on, fast, and last the coat. She had her arm halfway into the second sleeve when her fingers found the lining. She stopped. She knew this coat the way you know your own tooth with your tongue, where the seam ran inside the left panel, where the wool had worn thin over 6 winters, where a loose thread had lived near the pocket for a year because she'd never gotten to it. Her thumb went to the loose thread out of habit. The loose thread was gone. The seam under it was tight. New. The stitches sat a fraction proud of the cloth, even and small and a shade too dark, thread that didn't match, thread a careful man carries, because matching thread takes time, and dark thread reads as shadow. She pulled the coat off and turned it inside out under the lamp. The whole left panel had been opened and closed. Not the pocket she'd sewn the shape into. She hadn't sewn anything into this coat. The shape was in the uniform was in the closet, but the lining of the coat she'd worn on her own back to a party, the coat that had hung on a hook by the service door of a stranger's mansion for 1 hour this morning while she scrubbed a window that had no streak. They'd searched the seams of her coat because they didn't know the shape was in the uniform, looking in the wrong garment, and they'd still put a careful hand into the one thing she wore against her own skin, and closed it up so she'd carry the search home on her shoulders and never feel the weight. Junho, her voice didn't rise, it went flat, which was worse. Come look at this. He was there in 3 steps. She held the coat open under the lamp and put his hand where her thumb had been and watched his face change by 1 degree. That's him, he said. You're sure? That's his stitch. He rolls the last knot under so it can't be picked at. When did you last have your coat off your body? This morning. On a hook, by the service door, for an hour. The math built itself in front of her. Before I ever knew there was a gala. Before Heiress handed me the invitation. Then it started before the invitation. Junho straightened. The invitation was cover for tonight, for the room. But somebody put hands on your coat this morning, which means somebody decided you were a problem before anyone decided you were a joke. The joke came second. The search came first. Which means it was never about humiliating me. It was about finding what he gave you. The humiliation was gift wrap. He looked at the coat like it had spoken. Is there footage? There's always footage. 40 rooms, every hall, the service entrance. Dongwook wired the whole house before I ever worked there. Hei-rin never turned it off because she likes watching the staff. Laverne's mouth twisted. It saves 90 days on a drive in the office he died in. Can you reach it? From any house computer with the code. I know the code. He gave it to me the week before he died and told me to remember it and not to write it down. She heard herself say it and heard, underneath, an old man's voice telling her to keep the uniform, to remember a number, to not flinch. A man handing her keys, one at a time, and never once explaining the locks. He set this up. 11 months ago, he set all of it up and let me carry it not knowing. He knew you wouldn't flinch. Junho's voice was quiet. It's a compliment and a cruelty at the same time. He does that, did that. Don't. She folded the coat over her arm, lining in. We're going, you drive. If the destination changes, I'm out of the car at the light, and you can explain to Bei why you lost her guest of honor between two parties. He almost smiled. Understood. The car was black and low and exactly what she'd expected, and she got in anyway, because the destination was the only one that mattered. The bridge came up, the same bridge her $22 taxi had crossed the other way, with her rehearsing how to be small. She wasn't rehearsing anything now. Talk to me about the man, she said, so I know him when I see him. You won't see him. He's gone before you get there, or he's a body in a coat like anyone's. Junho took the ramp without slowing. But he reports to my uncle, and my uncle doesn't send him for rags. Whatever's in that house tonight, Sungho thinks it can hang him. He's right. You're very calm about hanging your uncle. I'm not calm. He said it evenly. He raised me after my father buried the family. Taught me to read a room, to turn people into sentences. Everything Bei hates about me. And I used all of it tonight to put my arm out for a woman he wants gone. So don't mistake steady for calm. I'm holding the wheel because the wheel is the thing I can hold. Laverne said nothing. Outside, the estates began. Walls and gates and the black spaces between street lamps where money kept its distance from the road. Decide something before we get there, Junho said. The footage. If it shows his man in your room, that's a picture of a crime, but it's a picture on his drive, in his house, that his people wipe by morning. You watch it, you know, and then it's gone, and it's your word. So I copy it. So you copy it, and now you're the woman alone in the dead man's office copying security footage the night of the fire. You've thought 2 moves, he's thought 6. He glanced at her. I'm not telling you not to. I'm telling you what it costs so the bill doesn't surprise you. You think I've been surprised by a bill in my life? Her hand tightened on the coat. I sent my nephew $800. I had 1,100 of. I know exactly what things cost. Turn here. He turned. The gate was open. That stopped both of them for half a breath. The gate to the O estate did not sit open. It sat shut, and it buzzed you in, and a camera watched you say your name. Tonight it stood open on the dark drive, one leaf swung wide, and there were no cars in the court where the family's cars should have been, because the family was across a bridge being photographed, and there was one light on in the whole face of the house. The office. Dongwook's office. 2nd floor, 3rd window, warm behind the glass. You said the man's gone before I get there, Laverne said. I said that. Junho cut the headlights and let the car roll the last of the drive on its own weight, quiet, to a stop short of the court. That light says I was wrong. She had her hand on the door. Wait. He caught her wrist, not hard, and let go the instant she looked at it. You don't know who's in that room. I know whose room it is. She pulled the coat tight. And I know the code, and the drive that holds 90 days is under the desk in that room. And if I wait for you to make it safe, it won't exist by the time it's safe. You wanted to know what I carry. Come find out, or stay in the car. She was out before he answered, moving across the black court in the flat shoes of a working woman, No crystal, no cape, no arm to hold, the gray coat with its one wrong seam wrapped around her, and the whole silent house rising up in front of her, with one warm window burning in it like an eye that had been waiting up for her to come home. She reached the service door. It was unlocked. Behind her, the car door opened, soft, and Junho's step came onto the gravel. Above them, in the third window, a shadow crossed the warm light once, slow, unhurried, the walk of a man who had all night and knew the family was 2 hours from home. Laverne put her hand flat on the door she'd walked through 10,000 times as furniture and pushed it open into the dark. The kitchen smelled the way it always did at night, cold stone and old bread. She knew it without light, walked the counter's edge corner to corner on a route her body had memorized before her mind ever paid attention, and behind her Junho moved slower, one hand out, a man reading a room he didn't own. Service stairs, she breathed. On the right. They don't creak on the third or fifth. How do you know which stairs creak? 6 years of not wanting to be heard. They went up. Third step silent. Fifth silent. On the landing she stopped, because the warm light was down the hall now, spilling out of the office door left ajar, and with the moving shadow came a sound she hadn't expected, the dry riffle of pages turned fast by a thumb. Someone was still going through the ledgers. Someone was still looking. Which meant he hadn't found what he came for. Which meant it was still here. Laverne felt the thought land in her chest like a stone dropped in a well, and she pressed her back to the wall and did the arithmetic Junho was always accusing her of not doing far enough. The ledgers were in the storeroom, staked for the fire. If the man was in the office turning pages, he'd already gone through her room, and her room was between the landing and the office, and her door, she could see it now, 3 feet down the hall, her door stood open the width of a hand. She had left it shut, a maid always left it shut. Junho's hand found her shoulder and pressed once. Wait. He put his mouth by her ear. Let him leave. He has nothing worth being caught over. The second he thinks someone's home, he's a shadow again. He has all night, you said so. Then we take away the all night. He eased past her, silent for a big man, and reached inside his coat, and Laverne caught his wrist for the second time that night. No, she whispered. No blood in the house Dong-wook built. Whatever that is, it goes back. He looked at her in the dark. She couldn't read his face and she didn't try. After a moment his hand came back out empty, and he showed her both palms, and something in her unclenched by a single notch. Then we do it your way, he said. What's your way? Her way was the light switch at the end of the hall, the one the night porter used, every sconce at once. She reached it in 4 silent steps, put her thumb on it, and threw the whole corridor into light. The office went quiet. The paper stopped. Porter's early, Laverne said, loud, in the flat bored voice of a woman who had announced herself down this hall 1,000 nights. Lights on in the master's office. That's a write-up if the family sees the bill. A beat of nothing. Then the office lamp went dark, and the warm window at the front of the house went black, and somewhere at the far end of the floor, a sash lifted, quiet, a man leaving the way careful men leave, through a window onto a roof, onto a wall, into the dark, between the street lamps. Gone. Just as Junho had said. She hadn't beaten him. She'd only chosen the moment he vanished. He'll tell Seong-ho the porter was home, Junho murmured. Let him. Porters are furniture too. She was already moving down the lit hall. Now, while the light's honest. The office was as she'd feared. The ledgers were off their shelf and spread across the desk, opened and fanned, the drawers standing out at different depths, the photograph of Dong-wook and the women face down where a thumb had turned it, looking for a note behind the frame. But the machine under the desk still hummed, its small green light burning. He'd gone through the paper and never touched the drive, because a man who works with scissors and thread doesn't think of the wire in the walls, and Dong-wook had wired the walls. Laverne knelt. She pulled the machine out on its tray, and her fingers found the keys in the dark of the desk well, and she typed the code the old man had made her swear to carry and never write, and the screen woke gray and cold and offered her 90 days. Show me this morning, Junho said over her shoulder. I know when. She scrolled the timeline back through the day, through the empty court and the family's cars leaving at 7, back and back to the flat gray light of morning. to the hour the staff wing sat empty because the staff were downstairs at breakfast. She stopped it there. She pressed play. The service hall came up on the screen, silent, gray. The row of hooks by the door. Her coat on the third hook, gray wool, exactly where she'd left it. A man walked into the frame. Not a shadow, not a face in a coat like anyone's. The camera Dong-wook had wired caught him full and clean under the hall light, and he stood at the hooks with his back mostly turned, and he lifted her coat off its hook and laid it across his arm and worked at the lining with something small that caught the light once. And his head turned as he worked, half toward the lens, enough. Laverne's breath stopped. "That's not the careful man," Junho said, very quietly. "No," her voice came out of somewhere underneath itself. "That's your uncle." Because it was Song-ho on the screen, graphite suit, gray at the temples, the antique cufflinks catching the hall light as he turned her coat in his own two hands and put a blade to the seam of it. Not a hired man, not a shadow with deniable hands. Seong-ho himself, in the staff hall, at the coat of a housekeeper, on the morning before anyone had thought to hand her an invitation, doing the careful work with his own fingers because whatever he was looking for, he trusted no one else to find it. On the screen he finished. He held the coat up, ran his thumb down the seam the way she had run hers an hour ago, found it good, and hung it back on the third hook exactly as it had been. Then, the part that put ice all the way down her arms, he looked up, straight into the lens. He knew where the camera was. He looked into it for 2 full seconds with the flat, calculating face of a man doing sums, and walked out of frame, unhurried, a man who had decided the footage didn't matter because it would burn with everything else tonight. The green light hummed. The hall on the screen sat empty with her coat back on its hook. He looked at the camera, Junho said. He looked at the camera. Laverne's hands were steady on the machine, steadier than she felt, the way they were steady on a window that had no streak. He knew it was on. He didn't care. You know what that means. He was never going to leave this drive in the house. He's going to burn the office tonight, with the ledgers. She felt the whole shape of the evening turn over and show her its underside. The fire pit isn't for a dead man's suits. It's for the walls. He empties the house, sends the family to a party, searches with his own hands so no hired man can testify what he found, and then it all goes in the pit. The ledgers, the drive, the office, the coat if he had to. A laugh came out of her, short and without humor. He didn't send the invitation to get me out. He sent it to get me here, somewhere that would hold a fire. Junho went still behind her. "That's not what I told you," he said. "I know what you told me." She looked up at him in the honest hall light, and for the first time all night there was nothing careful in her face. "You said the invitation was cover to empty the house." Bae said the same. "You're both half right and a step behind, and I'm on my knees in the room he's going to burn, holding the one thing he doesn't know survived." She stood and pulled the drive off the machine, no bigger than a bar of soap, and closed her fist around it. "So which is it, Phoenix? Did you bring me here to help me get this out?" The lights went out. The whole corridor, all at once, every sconce dead, the office black, the green hum under the desk gone silent with the rest. Not a switch. The house. Somewhere below them a breaker had been thrown or a hand had found the main, and the dark that came down was total and it was not empty, because under it, from the direction of the service stairs she'd sworn didn't creak, came the sound of a step. A third step. Silent. A fifth step. Silent. Someone who knew the stairs too. Laverne moved before she decided to. She pressed the drive flat against her sternum, under the crossed lapel of the gray coat, and put her back to the wall between the desk and the dead lamp. The dark held the shape of the room she already knew by heart. 6 years of knowing where a chair leg waited to bark a shin. She counted the steps as they climbed. A pause on the landing. Then the weight shifted toward the office, sure of the floor. Junho's hand found her wrist in the black and held it once. A question. She turned her palm up. "Wait." "Turn the breaker back on," a voice said from the doorway, not a shout. A woman's voice, level, used to being obeyed. "I know you're in there, St. Clair. You left every light in the hall burning like a church. Hey, say Rin." Laverne's shoulders came down a half-inch. Not relief, a different fear with a face on it. "I don't need the lights," Laverne said. "I can find my way around this house in the dark better than you can with a map." A short laugh. A phone screen bloomed, throwing Heiress's chin and cheekbones up out of the black, the rest of her a red smear where the gown caught the glow. She was alone. No bodyguard behind her. That was the part that put a stone in Laverne's stomach. Heiress had come up the service stairs by herself, at 10 at night, into a house she'd emptied on purpose. "He's not answering," Heiress said, and the phone tilted toward Junho. "Your uncle. I've called him 6 times since the gala. Do you know where he is?" "You first," Junho said. "I don't know where he is." The screen shook, a small tremor she couldn't hide. "That's why I'm standing in a room I was told would be empty and locked, talking to the 2 people he most wanted out of it." Laverne read the crack in the polish and did not trust it. A woman who cried theft on a red carpet could cry anything. "You emptied this house tonight," Laverne said. "Your invitation, your service card. You held the door for me so his man could work my room." "I held the door," Heiress said. "I didn't tell him what the man was for." The phone light swung to the desk, to the ledgers thrown open, to the recorder's dead green eye under it. Heiress went still. "You took the drive," she said. Nobody answered. In the quiet, the house ticked, cooling. "Good," Heiress said, and her voice dropped the trained edge entirely, went young. "Good. Keep it. If it's off the machine, he can't burn it with the rest." They stood there, 3 shapes and a phone. Laverne kept the wall at her back and the drive at her chest, and did the arithmetic she always did when someone handed her a gift. Who profits, and how, and when do they take it back? Heiress wanting her to keep the drive did not make Heiress an ally. It made Heiress a woman who had just understood she was standing on the wrong side of a fire she'd helped lay. "Downstairs," Junho said. "Not this room. This room has 1 door and a 2-story window, and I don't like either." "The kitchen," Laverne said. It was hers. 6 years. She knew which drawer held a knife and which chair sat under the panic button Dong-wook had installed by the pantry and never told his family about. They went down the front stairs this time, all the lights burning, because hiding was over. The man on the roof had already carried the news that she was home and not alone. Heiress's heels clicked behind her. Halfway down, Laverne stopped so hard the girl nearly walked into her. The wide double doors to the east storeroom stood open. The storeroom that had been packed floor to rafter with Dong-wook's life, the trunk, the suits, the dozens of ledgers, the second Navy uniform on the low shelf. Empty. Not tidied. Stripped. The shelves stood bare down to the bracket screws. A single wire hanger swung a slow half-circle where a draft touched it. Laverne walked in without deciding to. Her shoes found grit, pale flecks across the floorboards, the kind of powder a wardrobe trunk sheds when it's dragged instead of lifted. She crouched and touched it. Dry. Fresh. 2 lines of it ran to the garden door, and beyond the garden door, past the greenhouse, was the pit the burn crew had staked at 3 o'clock. "When?" she said. Her voice came out flat. "When did the truck come?" 7, Heiress said from the doorway. "Well, the Gala was seating. I saw the manifest on his tablet in the car. I thought—" She stopped. "I thought it was just his father's clothes. Old suits. I signed off on it because it meant I didn't have to smell that man's cologne in my house anymore." 6 years of holding her own face still served Laverne now. She did not let it move. Inside, the floor tilted. The ledgers she'd photographed were gone to the pit. The torn page with the ghost of Seung-ho's number, gone. And the second uniform, the twin, the one with the hard flat shape sewn in the pocket that she had left on the low shelf under a pile she'd told herself was invisible. Gone. She had backed up the photographs. 211 of them, in her sister's forgotten inbox, behind a password even her sister had lost. That was real. That survived. She held on to that the way you hold a rail on a boat. But the thing sewn into cloth, the thing Dong-wook made her promise to keep, the only object in the world she'd never let out of a locked room, that had been on a shelf she abandoned to keep herself invisible, and invisible had cost her the one thing that mattered. "My closet," she said, and she was already moving. Her room was worse than the storeroom because it was personal. They'd been careful once, this morning, with a blade and a patient knot. They were not careful now. The mattress lay half off the frame, her drawers hung out like tongues. The photographs of Josiah she'd left on the phone as decoy were scattered on the floor, and someone had stepped on one, a heel print through her nephew's face. The closet door stood open. The tissue paper she'd folded the old uniform in lay on the floor in a soft white heap, empty as a shed skin. Both dresses gone. Laverne stood in the doorway and made herself look at all of it, every violated corner, because looking away was a thing she had trained out of herself in this house years ago. Junho went past her, checked the window latch, checked the closet's back wall, moved like a man reading a room for exits and finding them. Heiress stayed in the hall with her phone lit, watching the stairs. They knew what to take, Laverne said. Not just paper. Cloth. Who told them cloth mattered? He didn't need telling, Junho said. He crouched by the tissue paper, lifted it with 2 fingers, let it fall. He sewed things into linings his whole life. The old man taught him that before he taught me anything. If Dongwook hid something in a hem, my uncle would look in a hem. Then it's in the pit. Maybe. Junho stood. The trunk went at 7. The uniforms were on a shelf, not in the trunk. Different trip. Your room was worked this morning and again just now. The mattress is fresh, the trunk grit isn't up here. 2 hands, 2 times. He's not burning it all at once. He's sorting. She heard what he wasn't saying and said it for him. He hasn't opened the pocket yet. He doesn't know there's a pocket. Junho looked at her, steady. You never opened the seam, neither did he, yet, or he wouldn't have needed the second trip. He took both dresses because he couldn't tell which one, and he's got them somewhere he can take his time with a razor. Where? Somewhere that holds fire and paper and doesn't ask questions. He said it plainly, and it landed plainly. There's a depot. Oh, family holdings, off the ledgers, a vault under a shipping office by the docks. He moved the workshop's inventory through it for years. That's how 40 women turned into 6, turned into 1 line, on paper. If he's staging anything to burn clean, it's there. Laverne looked at the heel print on her nephew's face. $400 she couldn't spare, sent twice, so a 15-year-old could get on a bus to a place she'd never see. That boy did not know his aunt was standing in a wrecked room at 10 at night deciding whether to walk into a mafia vault. He thought she scrubbed floors. He was right. She did. Take me to the depot, she said. No. Junho didn't raise his voice. You go home to Newark. You have the photographs. You mail them to a prosecutor and you disappear and I handle the rest. That's the clean version. That's the one where you live. And you get the drive. A beat. And I get the drive. There it was. The thing she'd been circling since the coat, since the card, since a man offered her his arm in front of 400 phones. She looked at him and let the question finally come all the way up. How did you know, she said, to check the seams tonight? He didn't answer fast enough. For a man who turned people into sentences, who had a clean line ready for every room, the half-second of nothing was as loud as a slammed door. You told me at the gala, Laverne went on, quiet, that your uncle's man opens linings and re-sews them. You told me to check mine before I slept. You knew the exact thing that had been done to a coat you'd never seen, in a house you weren't in, before I knew it myself. She took 1 step into the room, toward him, off the wall for the first time. You don't guess like that, Phoenix. You knew because you knew the plan. You knew this morning. I found out this afternoon. You found out this afternoon, which house and which woman. She was steady. The steadiness scared her more than shaking would have. That's what you said by the column. You spent the afternoon finding out who had to be out of the mansion. You didn't spend the afternoon finding out. You spent the afternoon confirming. There's a difference, and you used the soft word on purpose, because you turn people into sentences and you thought I wouldn't notice which verb you picked. Heiress had turned in the hall, watching them now, not the stairs. Junho set his jaw. If I tell you the truth, you walk into the dark alone tonight and you die, and the truth won't matter. Tell me the truth. He held it 1 more second, then he let it go, and his voice went flat and even, the voice of a man reading his own ledger. My uncle came to me 3 days ago, he said. He told me Dongwook left a loose end in the house. A maid he'd trusted with something. He didn't know what. A key, a note, a name. He wanted her watched, and he wanted her gone, Saturday night while the room got worked. He didn't look away, and she gave him that much. I said yes. I said use the gala. Bay's gala. Everyone will be there. No one watches a maid at a party. The invitation was the family's idea. The foundation was mine. The floor kept tilting. She kept standing. You built the door they walked me through. I built the door. His jaw worked. And then I saw your name printed on a $2 million dress in Bay's back room, and I understood the old man had chosen you for a reason, and I understood which side of this I actually wanted to be on, and I got in the car and I came to find you. Every word I said at the column was true. I just said it after I'd already used you as the reason the house would be empty. Bait, Laverne said. Bait, he agreed. She had known. Somewhere under the champagne she didn't drink and the arm she took, because taking it kept her alive in that room. She had known the man was a door and not a rescue. Knowing did not stop the drop. 6 years of being furniture in a house that broke her by inches, and the one night someone said her real name in front of a crowd, he'd said it because she was the piece he'd moved first. Get out of my way, she said. Laverne, you don't get to say it like that. Her voice didn't rise. It went colder, which in her was worse. You baited the trap, and then you sat next to it to see what came out. Fine. Something came out. It's me. And it's the drive. And both of them are leaving without you. She crossed to the wrecked bed and dug in the seam of the box spring where 6 years ago she'd cut a slit no maid would ever be searched for. The trick you learn in a house where everything you own can be looked at any time. Her fingers found the plastic bag, the phone, the real one, not the decoy. She'd left the decoy on the nightstand to be scattered and stepped on, and it had done its job. 211 photographs, backed up twice now, because on the taxi across the bridge she'd forwarded them to a second account she'd made and told no one about. She was a woman who kept the old uniform in tissue paper. She kept copies of copies. Dong-wook had chosen her because she didn't flinch. He'd chosen right, and he'd never seen the half of it. The depot, she said, standing, phone in her fist. You set a vault under a shipping office by the docks. If both dresses went somewhere to be razored open at leisure, they went there, because your uncle isn't a man who burns a thing before he's sure it's empty. He'll open the pocket first. I need to reach the pocket before he does. You need to reach nothing. Junho stepped between her and the door. Not a threat, a wall. You have the photographs. You don't need the key. Whatever's sewn in that pocket, the photographs already prove the fraud. Go home. You don't know what's in the pocket, do you? She stopped. He'd caught the seam in her too. No, she admitted. Dong-wook made me promise to keep the old one, the one with the mended hem. He never said why. I felt something hard and flat in the lining months ago and I never opened it, because opening it meant admitting I was carrying it, and if I was carrying it, then the promise was real, and if the promise was real, her throat closed for half a second and she opened it by force. Then he'd handed a dying man's last thing to a woman who scrubs floors, and I'd have to be worth it, so I left it sewn shut. For 11 months I left it sewn shut. Heiress spoke from the doorway, and her voice had gone strange. He handed it to you because you're the only person in this house who never wanted anything from him. Both of them looked at her. I did, Heiress said. Want things, everyone did. You didn't. She was looking at the empty tissue paper on the floor, not at Laverne. I called the man off tonight. From the car. After the gala. I told him the search was blown. The whole room was on 400 phones watching a maid become the guest of honor. Stop, come back. Her hand tightened on the phone. He didn't answer either. Same as your uncle. They've both gone quiet at the same time, and the storeroom's empty, and the trunk's already at the pit. She looked up. That's not a search anymore. That's a cleanup. When men like that go quiet and start a fire, the fire isn't for paper. It's for whoever can testify to the paper. The room got very still. Which is now the three of us, Junho said. Laverne moved to the window. Below, the drive curved pale toward the gate her key had always opened. It stood wide, the way they'd found it, and past the greenhouse a light burned that hadn't burned when they arrived, low and orange, at ground level, back where the crew had staked the pit. Someone's at the pit, she said. Junho was beside her in 2 steps, close enough she felt the heat off him, and hated that some animal part of her still registered it as safety. Not yet lit, he said, reading the color. Kindling light, a lamp, a burn barrel starting. Somebody's out there getting it ready. Both dresses are in a vault at the docks, Laverne said slowly, or both dresses are 20 yards from this window about to go in a pit. You don't know which. I don't know which. And your uncle counts on us not knowing which. One place is a trap and the other is the truth. And he'd love us to guess wrong. So we don't guess, Junho said. I'll take the pit, you take the… No, she turned from the window. I don't take orders from the man who built the door. Not tonight, not ever again. She said it clean, and it cut, and she meant it too. Here's what happens. Heiren drives me to the depot, because Heiren has an O family keycard and a reason to want her uncle-in-law's fraud on the record before it becomes her fraud too. You go to the pit, because you're the only one of us who can walk up on your uncle's men and not get shot on sight, and nobody trusts anybody. We just point the same direction for one night. Junho looked at her a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes that she chose not to name. If I'm walking to the pit, he said, and you're wrong about which place, I'm walking into nothing while he opens the pocket at the docks. Then you'd better hope I'm right. Laverne pulled the gray coat tighter over the drive. You used me to empty a house. Now I'm using you to cover a door. That's the engine, isn't it? That's what you called it. It runs both ways or it doesn't run. He almost smiled. It didn't reach anywhere. The old man really did pick you. The old man's dead, she said, and his workshop's in a shipping vault, and I'm the last woman standing who wore that uniform and remembers what it was. Move. They went down together and split at the bottom of the stairs like a thing coming apart. Junho took the garden door, toward the orange light, one hand loose at his side in a way that made Laverne understand he was carrying something under the tux she hadn't let herself see. At the threshold he stopped and looked back at her. His name for the depot, he said. If a man there asks who sent you, don't say mine. Say Dongwook. Say you're returning the old man's property. A beat. It won't get you in. But it'll make them hesitate, and hesitation is the only gift I've got left to give you tonight. Then he was gone into the dark toward the fire. Heiren's car was a low black thing in the front court, keys already in her fist. Up close, in the dome light, her face had lost its lacquer entirely. Mascara gone at one corner, jaw set, a girl who'd spent an evening watching her whole architecture come down and had decided, too late to be clean about it, which wall she wanted to be standing near when the dust settled. Why? Laverne said, one hand on the door. She had to ask. She asked everyone. Why help me? You put me on my knees to clean a window that was already clean. You called me your maid on a red carpet. Why? Heiren looked at her over the roof of the car. Because when they finish burning the women in those ledgers, she said, the last name in the book is O. He'll pin 40 vanished workers and 11 months of missing money on a dead man and his family, and the dead man can't answer, and his family is me. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she let it. You're not saving me. You've got a drive that ends me too if it lands wrong. I just want it to land on the right man. Get in. Laverne got in. The car pulled out through the open gate. In the mirror, the mansion shrank, one lit window, and, behind it, a low orange glow spreading in the garden. She thought of Junho walking toward it. She thought of the drive against her chest and the photographs in 3 inboxes, and the promise she'd kept sewn shut for 11 months, riding now in a vault toward a razor. The depot, she said. How far? 20 minutes, less, this time of night. Heiren drove hard and precise, a girl who'd been given fast cars instead of a father. There's a card reader at the loading gate. My grandfather's card still clears it. Nobody's canceled a dead man's access. They never do. Her eyes flicked to the mirror. What do we do when we're in? We find 2 navy dresses before your uncle-in-law finds the pocket. Laverne pressed her hand flat to the coat, to the hard shape of the drive, and past it, to the memory of a hem she'd never opened. And then, for the first time in 11 months, I cut a seam. The bridge lights came up ahead, then swallowed the car whole, and somewhere behind them a match was finding kindling, and somewhere ahead a man with a razor was deciding which dress to open first. The depot squatted at the water's edge, a long, low building the color of wet cardboard, one sodium lamp buzzing over a loading gate. Heiren held the dead man's card to the reader, a green tick. The gate rolled up on a groan. Inside was cold and vast and nearly empty. A concrete floor ran back into the dark, marked with the ghost rectangles of things that had stood there and been moved. At the far end, a steel door hung open on a vault the size of a garage, the vault Junho had named, where 40 women had turned into 6, turned into one line. Empty. Swept. A stack of collapsed cartons leaned against one wall. Laverne stood in the mouth of it and felt the floor drop out for real this time. No dresses, no trunk, no ledgers, nothing but the smell of dust and diesel, and a room that had been emptied inside the hour. "He moved it already," Heiress said, small. "No." Laverne crossed to the cartons. On the top one, a shipping label, still tacky, the ink not dry. She peeled it half off. A routing slip. A destination stamped in blunt black type. Not the pit, not the docks, not anywhere she'd guessed. An address she knew from a cream envelope with her own name in gold. The foundation, the assembly hall, the vote. "The gala's over," Heiress breathed, reading it over her shoulder. Why would he ship it back to the vote? Laverne's hand closed on the label. "There's a succession vote at the hall. Everyone who matters in one room, and a $2 million dress that's an emblem of the workshop he buried. He's not hiding it. He's putting it where it'll be watched. In the one place I got dressed to be seen, and he's counting on nobody looking inside the thing everybody's looking at." She turned, the slip crushed in her fist. "We drove the wrong way. He razored nothing. The dresses never left for the docks. They went where I already was, and now the pit's a decoy, and Junho's walking into it, and I sent him." Behind her, the loading gate began, on its own, to roll back down. Laverne caught the gate on its way down, both hands flat against cold steel, and it stopped a foot above the floor with a shudder that ran up her arms. Heiress dropped and rolled under it before it could think about descending again. Laverne followed, the shipping label still crushed in her fist, and came up on the loading dock outside with grease on her knees and the drive still riding hard in her coat pocket. The gate settled behind them. No one had touched a switch. It ran on a timer, or on a phone somewhere, and either answer meant they had lingered too long. "He knows we came here," Heiress said. Her thumb was already dialing. 6 calls, he picks up for no one. "He doesn't need to pick up." Laverne smoothed the label against her thigh, reading it a third time to be sure the ink hadn't rearranged itself. "Foundation address. Receiving door. A vote hall staging number. He needs us running in the wrong direction, and I gave him that for free." Heiress looked at the phone, then at the dark water past the pilings. "Junho. Went to the pit. Because I told him to." Laverne's jaw set. The dresses were never going to burn. Fire's the loudest lie in the room. Everybody watches the fire. She dialed the black card's number from memory. It rang once and cut to nothing, then rang again on a second try, and a voice came thin and wind-scraped, half swallowed by the sound of open flame. "Talk fast," Junho said. "You're standing at a decoy." A beat. The flame roared closer to the mouthpiece, then away. "There's a barrel. There's 2 of his men. There's a trunk going in as we speak. It's empty or it's rags. Look at it. Is it heavy going in?" Silence, and under it the grunt of men lifting. "No," he said, "light. 2 of them carrying it like it's got pillows in it. That's the show. The dresses are at the vote hall, inside the vitrine they built for the crown gown." She was already moving, Heiress's headlights swinging on across the empty lot. "He's not burning the evidence, Junho. He's hanging it in a glass box in front of the whole succession and daring anyone to be the one who breaks it open." The flame noise dropped away. He was walking. Because whoever smashes the glass in front of the family looks like the thief, and whoever opens it with a key looks like the owner. She got into the passenger seat, and Heiress threw the car into gear before the door shut. "Get to the hall. Don't run. You running is another fire. St. Clair." His voice changed shape. "Whatever you're about to do, I'm not there to stand in front of it." "I know," she said. "That's why it'll work." She hung up on him. She had never done that before, hanging up first, and it felt like setting something down that she had been carrying with both hands. The bridge came up orange and empty. Heiress drove the way she said everything, precise and a half-second too fast. And somewhere over the water she said, without being asked, "There's a recording." Of what? Him. Heiress's eyes stayed on the road. 3 days ago. "In the study. I didn't know what he wanted then. I record everything in that house. My grandfather taught me, keep your own copy, or you own nothing." Her throat worked. He said the family name goes last in the ledger. He said when the books are ash, the last signature standing is go. Oh, and a dead man can't defend a signature. He was going to hang it all on my grandfather. On me. Laverne turned in the seat. You've had this since Thursday. I've had a father in the ground 11 months, and an uncle in everything but blood, telling me to smile at his funeral plans. Hiram's hands were white on the wheel. I didn't know if it was real until I watched you find that coat lining, until I saw a woman who scrubbed my floors understand my family faster than I did. She pulled a slim recorder from the console, the kind that fit in a palm, and set it on Laverne's knee. You'll know what to do with it. I only ever knew how to hold it. Laverne closed her hand around it. 2 pieces of a thing now, the drive that showed Seong-ho's face at the coat, the recorder that carried his voice at the plan. She had spent 11 months believing she carried one dead man's superstition folded in tissue paper. She had never once, in all that time, let herself count how many hands were reaching for what was sewn into it. Pull over at the next light, she said. We don't have time to. Pull over. Hyarin pulled over. Laverne opened the coat, reached past the restitched panel to the inner seam nobody had thought to search because it held nothing but her, and drew out the old Navy uniform's pocket square of fabric, the one piece she had cut free and kept on her body since the storeroom, when she understood the twins in the closet were bait. She had carried the scrap and left the dresses. She had known, some animal part of her had known, to separate the key from its hiding place before she ever named the key aloud. She took out her house scissors, the small ones, and for the first time in 11 months, she cut the seam Dong-wook had asked her to keep. The thread gave with a sound like a held breath let go. Inside, wrapped in a second fold of cloth, lay a flat brass key, worn smooth at the grip. A number filed off its shoulder so long ago, it was only a ghost of digits. Not a house key, not a car. A display key, the kind that turned a lock on a glass case. That's it, Hirin whispered. That's what he tore the mansion apart for. That's what he stole 2 dresses to find. And it was never in the dresses. Laverne held it up to the streetlight. He's carrying 2 gowns to a glass box he can't open. He's got the lock, I've got the key. He just doesn't know it yet. She understood then, the whole shape of why the old man had chosen her. Not because she was loyal. Loyalty could be bought, and the house was full of it. He chose the one woman who never wanted a single thing from him, who picked a stranger off a marble floor without checking who was watching, who could be handed the one object that unlocked everything and would keep it sewn shut for 11 months out of nothing but a promise to a dying man. He needed a keeper who wouldn't spend the key. He found a woman the whole house had trained itself not to see. Drive, she said. The vote hall glowed. Cars lined the foundation's front for 100 yards, black and identical, drivers leaning on fenders. Inside, past the gala floor now cleared and redressed, the succession assembly had gathered. Lee elders, O cousins, lawyers, the men who moved money, and the men who moved men. At the head of the long room, under a cone of white light, stood the vitrine. Glass on 4 sides, waist to ceiling, and inside it the crown gown on its form, silver catching the light in 1,000 small fires. And beside the gown, folded flat on the vitrine's lower shelf where a careless eye would read them as packing cloth, 2 navy uniforms with mended hems. Song-ho stood at the podium, graphite suit, the antique cufflinks, the controlled social smile he wore like a second collar. He was mid-sentence when the doors opened, and he did not stop, because men like him had learned that stopping is what guilt does. And so the estate proposes a full and final accounting, he was saying, closing my late brother-in-law's affairs with the dignity they deserve. The workshop ventures were his passion, and regrettably, his weakness. The losses. He saw her. Laverne came down the center of the room in her housekeeper's coat, grease on the knees, the borrowed diamonds gone. No gown, no cape, nothing silver. Just the navy underneath, and the small brass key held up between 2 fingers so the light found it. The room turned, 200 faces, and every one of them watching the maid walk toward the glass. Miss St. Clair, Seong-ho's smile held. You're not on the register. Someone will show you out. No one moved to show her out. Junho had come in the far door and stood against the wall with his arms loose at his sides, saying nothing, doing the thing he was best at, being a shape everyone watched instead of the door. Laverne stopped at the vitrine. She looked at the 2 uniforms folded inside it, then at Seong-ho. "You went to a lot of trouble to put these in a box you can't open." She turned the key once in her fingers. "You searched a 40-room house. You cut open my coat with your own hand. I have you doing it. 90 days of you, on a drive that's already in 3 cities. You stole 2 dresses because you didn't know which one hid this." She held the key higher. "It was never in the dresses. It was in the woman you spent 6 years walking past." "That is a house key," Seong-ho said, and his voice had a crack in it now. "Hairline. That is nothing." "Then it won't fit." Laverne stepped to the vitrine's brass lock, slid the key in, and it went home with the soft certainty of a thing coming back to where it was made. She turned it. The glass door swung open with a sigh of released pressure. The room made a sound, low, involuntary. She did not reach for the dresses. She reached past them, to the false back panel of the vitrine, the one built to display the gown and nothing else, except that someone had built it with a compartment, because the man who lent the gown planned every inch of this 11 months before he died. Her fingers found the seam. It gave. Inside lay a folder, bound catalog on top, its cover the same brick building, the same row of navy women, the same crown gown stamped across the front. Under it, the receipts. Under those, the records, account numbers, transfer dates, 40 women's names with a line drawn through each, and a destination account inked beside it, and one page, torn from a ledger and taped whole into the file, where a single number appeared beside the last erasure, and that number was not the estate's. It was his. She laid the folder open on the podium, facing the room, the way Bay had taught her a quiet answer is no answer. 40 women, Laverne said. He didn't lose the workshop. He closed it one name at a time and moved what each name was worth into that account. The catalog and the ledgers use the same numbers. The dress on the form is the emblem, the last piece. The proof the workshop was real and worth exactly what he stole. She set the recorder on the podium, pressed it once. Seong-ho's own voice came out into the silent hall, clear, unhurried, 3 days younger. The family name goes last in the ledger. When the books are ash, the last signature standing is O. A dead man can't defend a signature. An O cousin in the second row rose halfway from his chair, then sat again, harder than he meant to. A woman near him pressed a hand to her mouth. The lawyers stopped writing. Somewhere at the back a phone's screen went dark because the man holding it had forgotten it was recording, and remembered, and let it run. "That's not my grandfather's voice on that machine," Heiress said, from the back of the room, and every head turned to find the heiress in the red gown, standing very straight against the far doors. "That's the man who told me to smile through the funeral. I made the recording, in my grandfather's study, 3 nights ago." Her chin lifted. "I own my own copy. He taught me that. Keep your own copy or you own nothing." Seong-ho turned toward her with the look of a man watching the last door close. "Hi, Rin. You don't understand what you've—" "I understand it took a woman who cleaned my floors to make me listen to a tape I'd already made." Her voice cracked and held. "That's the part I'll be ashamed of, not this." He reached for the podium. Not for the recorder, for the edge of it to hold himself up, and everyone in that room saw a man's legs decide to stop believing in him. "Forgery," he tried, but the word came out with no floor under it. "She's a servant. The Lee family will not stand for—" "The Lee family," said Jun-ho, and pushed off the wall. He walked the length of the room the way he always walked, unhurried, letting the crowd part because it wanted to, and not because he asked. He came to the podium and stood beside the woman in the grease-stained coat and looked at his uncle, the man who had raised him after his father buried the family, and something in his face was very tired and very finished. "I was going to inherit this," he said, to the room, not to Seong-ho. "The succession's tonight, my name at the top of it." He reached into his jacket and took out a single folded page, the succession instrument, his to sign. "My uncle built the road that brought this woman into my house so he could empty it. I helped him build it. I thought I was clever." His jaw moved. "I used her as bait, and I only stopped when I saw her name written inside a dead man's gift, and understood he'd seen something in 1 hour that I couldn't see in 20 years of being raised by that man." He tore the page, once, twice, and let the pieces fall on the podium beside the open folder. I surrender the privilege, he said. I want an audit. Every account, every Lee and every O ledger, open to an outside hand. If my house is clean, it survives the light. If it isn't, he looked at his uncle, then it should have burned a long time ago, and no Gala was going to fix that. The elders were standing now. 2 lawyers had their phones out, not filming, calling. An old cousin near the front had picked up the catalog and was turning its pages with a shaking hand, reading names he'd been told were losses. Seong-ho looked around the room for a face that would hold his weight. There was Hae-rin at the back, who had handed over her own recording. There was Jun-ho, who had torn up the crown. There were 200 people who had just watched a housekeeper open a glass box with a key a dead man trusted her to keep. He found no floor anywhere. He did not shout. That was the strange thing, the thing Laverne would remember. Men who plan fires are quiet, Hiren had said, and he was quiet now, at the end, the same as he'd been at the start. He straightened his cuffs. He set the antique cufflinks square, and he walked, alone, toward the side door, and 2 men in dark suits who had come as his, stepped aside to let him pass, and then, after a glance at the room, fell in behind him. Not as guards now, but as the beginning of the audit, walking the man to the place where men wait for lawyers. No blow, no gun, no blood on the marble Dongwook had lent. He fell the way a ledger closes, 1 line under a line, the last name struck through, and the name struck through was his own. The room did not cheer, it exhaled. Somewhere a woman was crying, one of the older ones, and Laverne learned later she had worn navy in that brick building 20 years ago and had spent a decade being told the work she gave her hands to had simply gone away. The woman came forward on her own. Gray hair, hands scarred at the knuckles the way hands get from a lifetime of needles, and she stopped at the open vitrine and looked at the 2 folded uniforms as if they were faces she knew. She touched the mended hem of the nearer one with a fingertip and pulled the finger back, quick, the way you touch something you're not sure you're allowed to. I stitched this hem, she said, barely a voice at all. There was a girl who couldn't sew a straight line, and I fixed her work so she wouldn't get sent home, 20 years ago. Her wet eyes found Laverne. They told us the shop failed. They told us we cost him money. I believed it. I believed it for 10 years. You didn't cost him anything, Laverne said. You were his best work. He said it in his own words. His best work. She pressed the catalog into the woman's scarred hands. Your name's in here. Real one. Not a line through it anymore. Bay came through the crowd on her cane, jade at her collar, and stopped in front of Laverne. She looked at the open vitrine, the fallen crown of torn paper, the folder facing the room. He built the compartment 11 months ago, Bay said quietly. The week he lent me the gown, he told me a keeper would come with the key, when the house was ready to hear the truth, and I was to keep the gown safe until she did. Her perceptive eyes went over Laverne's grease-stained coat, the navy underneath. He didn't tell me it would be you, but he told me how I'd know her. She won't ask for anything, he said. Laverne looked at the 2 uniforms folded in the glass, the mended hems, the twins. He made 2, she said, so they'd chase the wrong one. He made 2, Bay agreed, so that if they burned one, the promise still stood. She put a light-gloved hand on Laverne's arm. What do you want, child? Say it now, in front of them, or it never gets said. The whole room was listening. The succession was gone. The seat at the top of the Lee house was an empty podium and torn paper, and every powerful person in that hall was waiting to see what the maid would ask for, because they had all just learned she was the only one there a dead man had trusted. Laverne thought of Josiah, 300 miles away in Newark, asleep by now, who had needed $400 and gotten 8, and had never once been told his aunt scrubbed a marble floor at 3 in the morning to send it. She thought of 40 women with lines through their names. She thought of a promise she'd carried folded in tissue for 11 months because she was afraid to find out whether she was worth a dying man's last wish. I want the cooperative reopened, she said, under the names that are in that catalog. The real ones, not the estates. She looked at Junho, then at the elders, then at Bay. The accounts that took what those 40 women earned pay it back, with the interest they've been drawing all these years. And the workshop opens with its books facing out. Public. Every ledger, every quarter, on a wall where anyone who gave it their hands can read exactly what their hands were worth. A murmur ran the length of the elders. One of the Lee lawyers cleared his throat, the sound of a man about to explain why a thing cannot be done, and Bay turned her cane a quarter inch on the floor, and he found he had nothing to say after all. The estate has obligations, another elder began. Structures. One did simply, Laverne said. One man simply erased 40 women with a pen. If it was that easy to close, it's that easy to open. You just have to want the second one as much as he wanted the first. And for yourself? Bay asked. For myself. Laverne's chin came up. I've spent 6 years being furniture in a house that could see me only when it needed something moved. She looked at Junho when she said it, and he took it, and did not look away. If I run it, and you'll want me to, because I'm the only one here, every one of those women will believe. Then I run it in the open. No favors that turn into leashes. No gift that comes with a search behind it. Equal share, equal say, and the day anyone in this room decides I've served my purpose and reaches for the seams of my life again, they'll find I already told everyone where the key is. She set the brass key down on the podium, in the light, in front of 200 witnesses. There, now it's not sewn into anything. Now you'd all have to explain it. Junho picked up the key. He looked at it, then held it back out to her, across the podium, the way he'd once offered his arm and given her 10 seconds. On those terms, he said, in the open, my name on the audit first. Laverne looked at the key in his open hand. She did not take his hand this time either. She took the key, only the key, the way she'd taken the black card and not the promise. But she let her fingers rest 1 second on his palm before she closed them, and it was the first thing in 6 years she had chosen to touch in that house, because she wanted to, and not because it needed moving. On those terms, she said. Outside, past the tall windows, the orange light at the pit had gone out on its own. A barrel of rags and a lie, burning down to nothing, watched by no one now. The truth had never been near the fire. It had been in a glass box in a bright room, waiting for the one hand a dead man trusted to bring the key home. Her phone buzzed. Newark. A photo, sent an hour ago, wading through all of it. Josiah, grinning, holding a permission slip stamped paid, standing with his class by a bus. Laverne looked at it for a long moment, while the powerful people of 2 houses rearranged themselves around a truth they could no longer unknow. She typed back 4 words. He's proud of you, and did not tell him where she was, or what she had spent 11 months afraid to open, or that a room full of the richest people in the city had just watched a maid decide what her own life was worth. He didn't need the story. He needed his aunt on a bus platform saying she was proud. That was the only account she'd ever cared about balancing. Then she folded the 2 navy uniforms out of the glass, held them against her chest, the mended hems, the twins, the last of Dongwook's best work, and walked back up the center of the room, past all of them, carrying the only thing she had ever wanted from that house and had finally been given permission to take, the proof that she had been worth the trust. She kept the old ones, both of them. She'd earned the right to say why. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever kept working, silent and unseen, for people who treated you as furniture, until a single object proved your worth was there all along? When the truth finally opened like a locked vitrine in front of everyone, did you demand your terms, or did you settle for less than transparency and equality? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.